Hey my watchers, welcome. Today we are gonna see, what if Harry Potter was cursed throne holder in Game of Thrones? Join Patreon for early access and exclusive content of Super Op stories. Also contents that's too far for YouTube. You will get 400 plus content there, please do check that too. Please subscribe this channel, because definitely I will try my best to provide a valuable content for you all. Also check the description to support the original author for this beautiful creation. The world felt like ashes to him. He could not breathe properly. He coughed and wheezed as he felt warm blood spilling from his sides. No! He thought desperately, not like this. He tried to drag himself up, and with a loud groan he stood up. Everything around him was burning. He clutched his wound on his side as he desperately tried to search for his family in his burning home. He reached into the kitchen, desperately trying to reach across the room to go upstairs where his kids were, but what he saw in the kitchen made his heart stop. His wife, his lovely wife Ginny, lay there in a pool of blood, her face not recognizable due to the mutilation it suffered. Their wands lay there, snapped into pieces beside her. Rage, uncontrolled and unbridled rage simmered through him, his magic pulsing uncontrollably before it broke. His injuries too grave for him in his condition. Panic seeped in him as he tried to rush through the burning house trying to get to his kids. He did not see the red-colored light heading his way as he rushed through the room. The spell crashed onto his side as he was hurled through the window, crashing outside bleeding and unconscious. The Burrow 2021 Hermione POV. The fireplace lit up as green flames suddenly erupted and Minister Kingsley Shacklebolt's face emerged from the flames. Minister Hermione greeted, somewhat startled by the abrupt intrusion. What has happened? The Potters were attacked last night. The entire house was burnt. No one survived, Kingsley informed grimly. Everyone at the Burrow freezed as they heard the minister's words. A loud wail was heard as Molly Weasley howled at the news. Hermione and Ron sprang up as they collected their wands and nodded to each other as they rushed outside the house. They apparat instantly with a quiet pop to the ward line of Harry's house in Godric's Hollow. Devastation. That is what they saw when they appeared there. Ministry officials had filled up the place, sealing the area and placing appropriate repelling charms at a scene of a crime. The entire house was burnt and the upper floor has collapsed after being burnt out. Only the burnt shaky walls remained around the house, all that remained of the once magnificent cottage. Shock, rage, panic, despair ran through Hermione as tears welled up in her eyes. Ron was crying, weeping at the sight as they wept and despaired the fate of their family. The Auror doing the investigations approached the couple. Deputy Chief and Madam Granger, my sympathies. This is a day of tragedy. I am extremely sorry for your loss. Hermione nodded as she asked, what happened here? We can surmise that unknown assailants attacked the Potters last evening. As the Potters were inside a warded property, someone helped them do this. The Auror informed. Ron and Hermione paled at the news. Lord Potter was ambushed first. He was stabbed multiple times at the front of the house and left for dead. Lady Ginny suffered a terrible fate, he said grimly as he passed over the file, unable to say more. Hermione read the file and felt white-hot rage. Ginny was tortured for several hours. Her face had suffered more than 50 stab wounds, and at death her face was mutilated beyond recognition. As they walked toward the back of the house, both Ron and Hermione threw up. The three kids, James, Albus and Lily, or what was left of them, were impaled on sticks and their burnt husks were there for all to see. Where is Harry? Hermione asked, bile rising from her throat. We are not sure right now, but we believe that Lord Potter was later dragged inside the fire and he has perished. We are trying to recover his remains, but there seems none to be left. The Auror informed. Ron and Hermione sank on the ground, overwhelmed by devastation. Forbidden Forest, 2021 Harry's POV. He was tired. He was exhausted, but his rage kept him moving. He was going to slaughter every last one of them. He tripped and fell on the forest floor, groaning and panting in exhaustion. As he tried to get up, pushing his hands against the forest floor, he felt a small pebble in his hand. The deathly hallow he had dropped so many years ago was looking back at him. Desire, want, the need to see his murdered family. He almost was about to turn the stone in his hands as he suddenly stopped. Shame, guilt, fear. The emotions welled up in him. He could not say farewell until he had avenged them. It was his fault, so he did not deserve to see them. He crushed his will and desire, and as he went to chuck the stone back into the dense forest, the stone suddenly sank into his palms. Magical energy slightly pulsed through him as he felt some power return to him. He tried to pass swiftly through the grounds, past the castle, toward Dumbledore's final resting place. He unsealed the tomb, and with the now decaying body of the ancient headmaster, lay the most powerful wand in all existence, the Elder Wand. He took the possession of his wand by conquest as he felt the wand sing to him. Power filled him and his depleted reserves. Wrath, anger, hate, emotions whirled in him as he decided to cut a bloody swath through the wizarding world to kill those who took everything away from him. But he was one and there were so many. He had to plan, he had to disappear and return with a vengeance. He had to plan. He crushed his emotions and started to think in a calm manner. Taking deep breaths, as he tried to calm himself, he felt the wand glow and pulse in his hand. He felt warmth along his hands and neck as magic coursed through him. He could no longer feel the stab wounds which had reduced to a dull throbbing before. He looked down and felt that his body had recovered and his wounds sealed. The wand also merged into his body, filling and enlarging his core. With a look of renewed vigor, with a quiet pop, he disapparated from the grounds of Hogwarts, which was previously considered impossible. Minister's Chamber, Ministry of Magic, 2021, Hermione's POV. The office was in pandemonium. One of the most beloved war heroes and his family was murdered in a cold, brutal fashion, and the wizarding people wanted justice for their savior. There were thousands of protests in Diagon Alley, Hogsmeade, and other wizarding establishments, and the minister was under a lot of pressure to quickly act. Hermione cleared her throat and spoke up. Based on our evidence gathered and the patterns we can see, we can highlight the suspects of the crime as Draco Malfoy, Astoria Greengrass, Theodore Knott, and Pansy Parkinson. There is a fifth person who is currently unknown who was at present when the events occurred. There was a small commotion as Daphne Greengrass, one of the unspeakables, stated, "I believe I have information on that matter." Hermione raised an eyebrow, urging her to continue. "It's Delphine Riddle," she spat. Hermione went, still hearing the name. "She is the daughter of the Dark Lord and Bellatrix Lestrange. I believe she seeks the Elder Wand, and that was the primary purpose of the attack. I would assume that since Potter did not relent, they slaughtered everyone to send a message." Daphne explained. "Your sister is one of them," snarled Ron. "Why should we not arrest you right now? For all we know, you can be a spy for those filthy child killers." The room went tense and hostile, and a few people nodded their assent to Ron's words. "Because I am not my sister, you moron," Daphne quipped, her voice cold as ice. "She has made her bed and she will die in it. But I don't want her actions to sully the name of House Greengrass because, as I might remind you, she is a Malfoy now." "Enough," Minister Shacklebolt intoned. "Hermione, see to it that these vile criminals are caught immediately. Expense is not an issue, but I want them found." Hermione nodded. Before anything further could be said, the secretary of the minister burst into the office shrieking, "Lord Potter is alive. He has attacked Malfoy Manor. The Dimily received an urgent flu distress call a few minutes ago. Hermione, Ron, go and end this. We know where they are, and bring back Harry in one piece." Kingsley commanded. The couple practically ran from the room to give orders to the Aurors and hit wizards to end this madness and to rush to their friend. Malfoy Manor, 2021, Harry's POV. He sidestepped a curse as he conjured darts and shot them back at the guards at the entrance of the gates of the manor. He engaged the next few minutes trying to overpower them with his superior magical prowess, but quickly realized they were too many of them and a single SPE could take him out. He adjusted the invisibility cloak along his waist, wishing if he could end this quickly and disappear. As he cast the next spell, a blasting curse confringo, he felt his power sing as the curse released from his hands and headed towards the gate. The spell tore apart the dense shield spell which the guard was holding and hit the wall behind him and exploded. As Harry approached the gates and studied his destruction, he conjured daggers and finished off the stragglers and injured as he headed into the manor. He saw Lucius Malfoy approaching him with his wand drawn. Harry holds his hands up as the old Malfoy was suddenly picked up from the ground. Harry raised his hands and the Malfoy lord rose higher in the air. Harry turned his hands and suddenly Lucius was screaming as he felt his bones pop, twist and his joints dislocated. His wand drops limply from his hands. Harry uses his other hand to conjure a wooden spike which he places right under Lucius. He then puts his hands down as Lucius starts falling to the ground, accelerating towards the wooden spike. Lucius lets out a huge scream as the wooden spike impaled him. The tip of the spike came out through the left eye as Harry left the now dying man in agony in his last moments. He entered the manor and entered the main hall. He saw the people he had given second chances to, the people who slaughtered his family. They deserved every horror brought to them. He lets out a manic smile which promises vengeance to the remaining people in the hall. Malfoy Manor, 2021, Draco's POV. Dread filled me as I saw Potter enter the hall. The moment I saw him, I knew that this was the end of the Malfoy line. We tried to end him and now he will end us. I saw him suddenly disappear and then I see a dagger suddenly buried in Pansy's left eye. Potter suddenly is in the middle as he deftly moves around and evades our point-blank range spells and deflects them with his hand. His other hand has the sword of Godric Gryffindor which suddenly came down and decapitates my wife Astoria as I numbly see it happening. Within a few moments I see the people around me mercilessly butchered. I hide behind the fights to try to escape from this manor as Delphine and Potter start to fight each other. I try to use the distraction to escape. As I run towards the exit, I hear the sound of spells stopping. As I fear for my life and try to run away from the death Potter promises, I suddenly feel a huge pain searing through my chest. I see Potter's cold, green eyes. I see the sword of Gryffindor impaling me through my chest. As I choke on and cough out blood, I see Potter's other hand, which was carrying the head of the recently slaughtered Delphine Riddle. My eyes grow heavy and I see only darkness. Malfoy Manor, 2021. Hermione's POV. Malfoy Manor had been devastated. As Hermione walked towards the manor, she could see bodies of Death Eaters recruits littered everywhere. Before the manor, Lucius had been skewered with a wooden spike. Hermione shuddered and moved ahead. She could realize that Harry had intentionally prolonged and given torturous and painful deaths to the people he slaughtered in revenge. She entered the main hall and once again within a week, she lost all the contents of her stomach as she threw up at the sight. The heads of the Death Eaters were laid up in spikes in a circle and in the center was the head of Delphine Riddle. Her head was burnt and half her face had completely melted and eyes had been punctured with blunt force. Half her face was her skull and the other half of her face had captured the agony she had gone through. An ethereal green snake was entering her mouth and exiting from the eye sockets like the dark mark. She really needed to find Harry. She suddenly felt the galleon from the DA warm up suddenly. Her eyes went wide as she rushed from the place to find Harry. Death Chamber. 2021. Harry's POV. Harry was waiting at the chamber, hearing the voices from the chamber. He felt tired and old. He did not feel any regret over his brutal actions in the past few hours. His rage, his anger, his wrath had been spent and he was now wallowing in guilt. He sees Hermione enter the room. She runs up to him but pauses as he looks up at her. "Harry," she said, "I'm really sorry for what happened." She paused. "We went to Malfoy Manor as there was a distress call initiated. Harry, we saw what you did," she trembled. "I know," Harry said tiredly. "I do not regret it." He looks at the Veil of Death and starts to walk towards it. He stops near the foot of the veil and turns back. "I had enough. I have nothing to love for. I accept my death," he intoned. "I have left everything to you and Ron," his voice going soft. "Use it well for UF family." Before Hermione Granger Weasley, head of the DMLE, could stop Harry Potter, savior of the wizarding world, defeater of the Dark Lord Voldemort, and the Master of Death, stepped through the veil and departed the world. The void, Harry's POV. There was nothing. Harry felt that he was stuck in eternity in a limbo. His head started to swim. He wished for this feeling to stop and suddenly he was no longer feeling the dread and the feeling of being stuck. He saw a figure approaching slowly. "Master," the figure intoned. "Finally, we meet." Harry looks at the cloaked and hooded figure and could see that the feminine figure had a short build with silver curves. She was beautiful to look at, but her eyes held such coldness, and it was so devoid of life that it made her look unnatural. "So you are Death," Harry surmised. "Well, get on with it. Let's leave for the great beyond or whatever nonsense there is now. So I can finally get my peace. So young, to have achieved so much, only to lose it all," Death intoned. Suddenly the calmness with which Harry was interacting disappeared as rage coursed through his body. His green eyes blazed with fury as his aura flared around him as a strong breeze from nowhere seemed to appear. "Do not mock me," he spat. "You have no idea what I lost, and it seems like you are wasting my time. Do your job and stop talking to me." Death was alarmed by the sudden display of power. She moved in to speak. "Harry Potter," she spoke, her voice ethereal. "You have done a great service to all mankind, and you have suffered greatly. Lord Voldemort had broken the chains of fate by creating the Horcruxes, and he was essentially out of our grasp. The lives he destroyed, the calamity he brought this world would have never managed to survive with an insane, ruthless megalomaniac working in the shadows. You stopped all of that, and because of that, fate has declared you her champion." She further stated, "The birth of Delphine Riddle should have never happened. But because it did and you became the sole owner of the Elder Wand, you became a target of the girl without even realizing it. However, with her death, the world would be at peace for now." "For now?" Harry asked. "Yes, for now," Death nodded her head. "With your death and the loss of Fate's champion, the fate of Earth is total annihilation in the war with the non-magical folk, which would wipe out the planet from existence. However, there is a way to stop this." Feeling resigned as he could not let countless people die needlessly, Harry asked how to stop the total annihilation of his people. "Many worlds exist, Earth being one of them. However, the energies which decide the continuation of the annihilation of a world has a lot to do with balances." Death explained. "We want to send you to a world which we believe would face complete annihilation if we do not send a champion." "And what sort of world is this that I am heading towards? Will I be reborn? How do I stop this annihilation on my own?" Harry asked, feeling dubious. "The world we are sending you is set in medieval times. You will be born to one of the great houses of the realm, and as for the last question, it is your goal to re-establish the use of magic in the world. You will have your powers which have been bestowed upon you upon your ascension as the Master of Death, and you will have your magic." "That is quite vague," Harry argued. "That is not much to go on." The surrounding was getting foggy again. Harry could hear Death's voice. "You will find out everything soon enough. Good luck on your quest." Before Harry could say anything, the world started to spin, and suddenly it turned to complete darkness. The fields around the castle of Winterfell were green and blooming. The farmers were busy tending to their crops since the summer had been there for a long time. The peasants and farmers were able to grow and store more food crops for the surely coming harsh winter. "Winter is coming," thought the veteran Lord Stark, the Lord Paramount and Warden of the North. Looking towards the north of his castle, he saw the snow-covered fields which were in the north. Summer snow, they call it in the north. The north was a harsh place, breeding sturdy, hard men and women for whom surviving each year was a great challenge. The kingdom of the north, while being as large as the rest of the 6 kingdoms combined in Westeros, was mostly a barren land. Forests and hard plateaus covered most of the region, and the mountains were to the north of Winterfell. The north was largely poor and left alone by the rest of the kingdoms, who saw no interest in entering a land of harshness and cold. To the north of Winterfell lay Castle Black, where the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch hosted the headquarters of the Ancient Order. The Order was formed to be the shield that guards the realms of men when the long night had occurred and cold ice creatures had woken up, slaughtering men, women and children they could find, and added them to the army of the dead. An event which had occurred more than 8,000 years ago. Stories that mothers told their children to frighten them and be good, myths and legends and folktales that were told to the children of the North. Shaking his head, Eddard, or as people who were close to him called him Ned, turned towards the castle courtyard where 2 boys were sparring as the Castellan Ser Roderick Castle was training them in their swordplay. Another boy stood by the Castellan, looking at the boys fight with a smile on his face as he watched his brothers fight for the win. All the boys were aged around 14 name days, and the 2 boys, Rob and John, were moving gracefully and parrying each other's moves, neither giving an inch. Rob was powerfully built, stocky with red-brown hair and blue eyes, favoring his Tully side. The eldest of the Stark children, the heir of Winterfell, young Robb was well loved by the lords and the people of Winterfell. He was strong and fast and accompanied him on several meetings with various lords. Ned was happy that while growing up, Robb had seemed to develop a keen sense of northern honor and was becoming well loved by his eventual subjects. With skills in sword and lance which were well above par for his age, the young wolf, as he was called, was starting to become really skilled as a warrior. Dueling him and parrying and countering his blows was Ned's baseborn son, Jon Snow. Jon resembled the most as a Stark amongst his brothers, something which caused more undue hate to come his way from his father's wife, Lady Catelyn Stark. Jon was lean and wiry. Unlike Robb, young Jon was more quiet and prone to melancholy and quite sullen and brooding. Eddard has tried his best to curb some of Catelyn's tendencies towards Jon, but a child can easily understand scorn much like love, and Jon grew up solemn and guarded and slightly quick to sense a slight. Jon's swordsmanship skills were second to almost none. Even Eddard believed that he himself was nowhere close to Jon's level when he was his age. Jon had intended to join the Night's Watch as soon as he turned of age, but Ned believed that his second son, the one standing close to the Castellan, would probably derail Jon's plans if he had his way. Ned couldn't help but smile at his second eldest son, Harlan Harry Stark. Harry was a happy child growing up, and he had features of the North, although his green eyes were something which neither Catelyn nor Eddard possessed. He had a slender build like Jon, but he was taller, just under 6 feet. His black curls of hair fell to his shoulders and his stubble was visible. He was alone amongst the 3 brothers who was armed to the teeth while the others had practiced swords. Harry was an adept swordsman and, as Ned and many in the North had come to believe, one of the best swordsmen of all time. He wielded 2 swords, one a bastard longsword and the other a short sword. The 2 swords were hung across his back in their scabbards across each other, making an X on his back. He was covered in leather armor with steel plates covering the vitals. On his waist were around half a dozen daggers which he could throw with deadly precision. Jon and Robb were still dueling each other skillfully, but it was becoming apparent that Robb was tiring quickly now. Jon quickly closed the gap, sensing the advantage, and pushed harder and made more faster and powerful strokes to overpower his half-brother. Robb, getting frustrated parrying the blows, saw an opening and lunged, but Jon had sidestepped the thrust to his left and at the last moment made a swift movement, disarming Robb in a swift motion and pointing the sword to his neck. Robb panted in exhaustion and a slight bit of incredulity. "I yield." Jon grinned and the brothers clasped their hands together as Harry and Ser Roderick approached them. "Well fought, Jon. I see you have put in the tip that I gave you the last time we dueled." Harry congratulated. "Which tip?" asked Robb, opening a water skin and drinking from it. "Harry told me that a way to ensure that my strikes connect rather than be parried, he told me to sometimes add a bit of." Jon tries to remember hard the word that Harry had said, but it sounded foreign to him. "What I told Jon was that if he attacked you with strikes with varying speeds, he would have the edge, as that tends to surprise opponents," Harry explained. "Yeah, that exactly," added Jon brightly, and he saw Harry's bemused face. "I will keep it in mind. Now that you explain it that way, I can see why I was facing so much difficulty in landing a blow on you. I couldn't essentially understand or read your speed as you kept changing it through the duel." Robb agreed, looking thoughtful. "My lord, will you be training now?" asked Ser Roderick. "Yes. Best get warmed up now, as I might be leaving for the patrol again in some time." Harry agreed. Ser Roderick nodded and motioned 8 of the household guard, including Jory Castle, to take the stand against Harry. Ned looked down in interest, as he had seen his son train ruthlessly on the training field even on wintry nights to get this far. He saw his wife, Lady Catelyn, coming up to him, as she also stood next to him to watch their son train. "Beat them, brother," cheered the 5-year-old Arya Stark, as his younger children, 4-year-old Bran, 8-year-old Sansa, came to the courtyard to see their brother train. The 2-year-old Rickon was on Kat's arms as she carried the baby in her arms. Ned looked down to see that Harry had his swords drawn, and in the center as he was circled by 8 men. Harry kept twirling his swords, changing and reversing his grip smoothly and deftly, his swords making graceful and deadly arcs around the air. 3 men charged together, trying to overpower him. They lunged and swung their swords at Harry as he gracefully parried 2 of the strokes and sidestepped the 3rd one neatly and started to spin around the ground, dodging and ducking the swords that were aimed at him. Seeing a gap as one of the 3 attackers faltered slightly, he spun and slashed both his swords on the man's head and shoulders. The long sword slammed into the man's head, effectively giving him a slight concussion as the slash that Harry made with the back of his blade connected his collarbone. He was flung out of the circle, dazed and out of the fight. If Harry has been trying to kill the man would have lost his head. He ducked and parried 3 lunges beautifully with his long sword as he absorbed the impact so gracefully that the displacement from one strike led him almost precisely to the next point where the next attack was going. Suddenly, ducking under the arms and lunges of 7 people who were attacking him now, he ducked and rolled and sprang up and kicked one of the guards nearest to him hard, which threw the guard a couple of feet back, as he with powerful strokes hit 3 of the men with the back of his short blade in their head and neck areas and landing hits on 2 of them, effectively knocking them out of the fight. The 3rd man blocked his initial strike but did not see the pommel of the long sword ramming on his forehead as he fell unconscious. The last 2 men looked nervous at the attack from Harry, and they took up a more defensive stance. Harry started raining blows on them and in a short time had them disarmed and unconscious on the ground. The last guard who had been kicked in the chest walked up to Harry and yielded. Everyone looked on in awe as a single boy of 10 and 4 name days defeated veteran guards, 8 of them without breaking a sweat. Harry had achieved so many such miracles that it was no longer jaw-dropping but awe-inspiring to the people of the North. As he was standing in the upper floors of the castle watching at the courtyard as his children mingled and played and laughed, Maester Luwin came to Lord Stark with a scroll and a grave face. "My lord," he said gravely, "I am afraid it is grave news. The Ironborn have declared open rebellion. Balon Greyjoy has declared himself the king of the Salt Throne. The king has raised his banners and has summoned you to Lannisport." Eddard Stark, the Lord Paramount and Warden of the North, looked on resolutely with a face of steel as he desperately sent a prayer to the old gods so that his family does not get torn apart by the ravages of war.
Winterfell, 289 actini, Robs P.O. Bebasha.
Robb looked at Harry with astonishment and reverence. He knew that his younger twin was better than him, but his skills with a sword were astonishing, and Robb knew that this was something that he could never surpass his younger twin in. Robb was not jealous of Harry, he was proud and happy for him. Being the eldest son and heir, Robb, while growing up, used to feel inadequate compared to his talented and charismatic twin. But Harry took away all of his fears and feelings of inadequacy. As a child of 10 name days, when Robb had thrown a tantrum with their mother Catelyn, it was surprisingly Harry who sat down and talked to him. By the end of the conversation, Robb never felt more ashamed of himself, and his respect and reverence for his younger twin had increased ever since. Harry, despite being the second heir, tried hard and excelled at everything to protect the Starks, to enrich them, to make them powerful. So that when Robb became the Lord Paramount, the Starks would not be known only for their honor and courage but their wealth, knowledge in administration and being efficient rulers. Robb was young and did not understand many of the projects and tasks that his twin the Black Wolf used to undertake. But he had understood that Harry loved them dearly and would do anything for them. He looked on as he saw his father be approached by Maester Luwin, and his father suddenly departed the balcony and proceed to move towards his solar.
Winterfell, 289 actini, Jon's P.O. Bebasha.
Jon looked up at his brother Harry and smiled as Harry finished his fight. He and Harry were so alike in their choices. While Harry was still a little different than Jon, Jon always felt safe and protected near Harry. Harry was kind, generous, and honorable. Harry had trained with Jon endlessly, and Jon knew that it was because of Harry that Jon was treated so much better than before. Lady Catelyn used to ignore him, but the vile insults had stopped. Jon was a part of the family, and no one at Winterfell used to call him a bastard. Jon knew that it was his brother and the love the people bore for him which protected the bastard Snow. Jon heard the stories of the Black Wolf on his patrols and fights against bandits and scum who would attack and raid villages and caravans. The small folk adored Harry, as he was constantly fighting for the villages and towns of the North, and as Harry made several large investments, and all the 3 cities of the North had a Stark enterprise running which gave jobs to the small folk. Jon knew his brother kept busy, as he was often seen discussing with Maester Luwin and father on several projects which he had been working on. Jon had decided he would soon also bring honor to the Starks. While he loved his brother and his family, Jon knew that Harry would always protect him, and Jon wanted to contribute to something useful. So looking to Uncle Benjen, Jon had decided to join the Night's Watch once he came of age. He knew Harry was against this idea, and he said that he had other options for him. Jon wanted to make this sacrifice for his brothers to ensure that he would never allow his birth to cause an issue of tension in the family, and he had decided to join the Night's Watch to save his brothers the complications of him being a bastard when they came of age and ruled the North. He saw his father talk to Maester Luwin and head to his solar. From the corner of his eyes, he saw his brother look up at the exchange and also head towards their father's solar.
Winterfell, 289 actini, Catelyn's POV baixa.
Many say that second sons and other sons born after the heir are spares, that they are to be the commanders and soldiers for their brother and liege lord. And if their liege lord died with no heirs, then be the lord of the lands by right. That is how the world worked, and that is how great houses taught and educated their kids. But a mother knows that a firstborn child is as precious as your latest born child. For a mother, there can be no distinction among her children. For me, I had been given a lesson from the old gods to be kinder and to be more benevolent towards all children, even the bastard-born child of my husband. Or that is what I have come to believe. My son Harlan Stark, the younger twin of Robb Stark, was 5 years old and was playing with the bastard of my husband and Lord Eddard when I happened across them. Reviling bastards due to their nature, I slapped the bastard boy Jon Snow hard and had the guards send him to the stables to be punished for his daring. A bastard should always know his place. My son Harry, as we all came to call him, looked at me in what seemed to be despair before he adopted a melancholic look. He refused to eat that night, saying he did not feel well, and went to his chambers. The following day, sickness took hold of my son, as what I believe was a curse of the old gods. His body burned with fever as he remained mostly unconscious. Maester Luwin tried to bring down the fever using his knowledge to its depth, but to no avail. I prayed to the old gods and knew, but my little boy seemed to wither away. As I approached the godswood to approach my husband, I saw my eldest Robb and the bastard Jon, kneeling in front of the weirdwood tree and praying. Please, I could hear the bastard boy pray, please make Harry well again. He is the only one who makes me happy here. I make everyone else sad. The maester says that you are calling him, so please take me instead of him. The boy wept and prayed. Robb, my eldest, bless his heart, understood the bastard's pain and anguish and hugged him and consoled him as the boy wept and prayed. Jon, he said firmly, his young voice sounding so mature and out of place. I love you, little brother, and Harry loves you. We three are together and we will always be together. As brothers, nothing will change that. And I have faith in the old gods that they will cure Harry. Now come, let us pray to the old gods, and none of that you wanting to die for Harry, little brother. For Harry will bring you back to life just to smack you, Robb said. I never felt prouder of my son Robb as I heard a small cough and could see my husband standing next to me, looking sad, disappointed at me, while looking at his sons with love. He strode towards the boys and hugged them, and the three of them started praying to the old gods. Family, duty, honor. These were the words of House Tully, the words that were taught to me as I grew up. But here, standing in the godswood, seeing my husband and his trueborn and baseborn sons both pray together for the other dying one, I realized I had failed as a mother. By driving and punishing Jon, I was making him resentful and hateful of his existence. Him offering to die for Harry was proof of that. And what happened afterwards made me believe that my son was suffering and I was being punished for my deeds. As they prayed in the godswood, the skies rumbled and became darker as dark clouds blocked the light from reaching the grounds. The winds started to howl and thunder and lightning started all of a sudden. Out of nowhere, a storm as deadly as any had started. Suddenly a bolt of lightning struck the weirdwood tree in front of which my husband and the children were praying. They were thrown back due to the backlash. I was blinded by the light, and the next moment filled me with fear as I feared for the lives of my family. The three stood up, barely ruffled, but their eyes had widened as the spot on which the lightning had struck. There now stood a mark instead of scorched wood, a triangle, a circle within the triangle, and a straight line traveling through the middle of the structure. A a symbol surely from the old gods. As we were returning towards the castle as the storm was getting worse, we saw one of the helpers who worked with Maester Luwin running towards us. "My lord," he yelled. "My lord, the young Lord Harry is awake. He is asking for all of you. Maester Luwin asked me to inform you of this immediately." We ran towards his chambers. We entered his chamber and saw Harry reading a book calmly as Maester Luwin sat next to him, looking quite bewildered. "Father, mother," Harry greeted politely as he stood there gaping at the scene. "Rob, John, come here," he said gently. The young boys needed no more encouragement as they rushed to their brother, hugging him and crying. Harry also hugged them both and told John seriously, "Never have to think of such things ever, little brother. We are brothers. Believe me." John bowed his head and nodded as he hugged Harry harder. As Harry was talking and consoling his brother, Ned and I came near his bedside trying to believe what we were seeing. As we kept assuring ourselves of the miracle that occurred, my eyes fell onto the book that Harry was reading. The title of the chapter made me look at the book again, eyes widening as I realized my fears and prayers had been answered indeed. Below the title of the story was the same mark that appeared on the tree, the symbol she considered of the old gods. And above the mark was the title of the story, A Tale of Three Brothers.
Winterfell, 289 actini, Harris po bebasha.
Harry sheathed his swords as he moved across the courtyard intent on meeting his father in the solar. He had received intel and was sure that the Ironborn had started an uprising. As he walked across the courtyard intending to find out more, little Arya ran up to him and jumped into his arms. "Harry," giggled the little Arya. "You were so strong and powerful. You beat them all," she said excitedly. Then with a big pout asked, "Big brother, please teach me, please? I want to be as strong as you when I grow up." Harry almost caved in. He laughed out heartily as he pitched little Arya's cheeks. "I will, sister, but now you are too young. Once you are of 8 name days, I will surely train you," he promised. Arya pouted at not getting her way but happy that she got a promise from Harry. And she knew Harry always kept her promises. She jumped off from his arms, hugging him one more time before running after Bran to play with him. Harry smiled as he saw the little she-wolf speed off after her brother. He approached near his father's solar and knocked. "Come in," came his father's voice. As Harry walked into the solar, he saw his mother, Lady Catelyn, Ser Roderick Castle, and Maester Luwin in the room along with father. "Father," Harry spoke, "I just heard some alarming news about the Ironborn near Bear Island, Blazewater, Flint's Finger, and Sea Dragon Point." His father nodded his head gravely. "Yes, Balon Greyjoy has declared rebellion against the king. I have been asked to call the banners and reach Lannisport, from where we will sail to the Iron Islands to put down the rebellion." He looked at Harry and asked, "You have something to say?" "Well, yes, father," Harry said. "I will have 1,500 winter wolves assembled at Winterfell by tomorrow morning. I will divide them into 5 patrols, 4 of whom will be fortifying our western coasts." "What about the 5th?" Ned asked. "They will be accompanying us to Lannisport, father," I explained calmly. "Absolutely not," Catelyn stated firmly. "You are too young." Even Ned nodded his head. "Harry, you are an accomplished warrior, that is true. You have been dealing with the bandits and the outlaws quite efficiently, and you have made an excellent investment in the training and deployment of the winter wolves. But this is war," Ned finished firmly. "There is no need for you to be involved in war unless there is no other option. And this rebellion will not be a long one. We have superior forces compared to that of the Iron Islands." Harry listened to his father and mother intently before saying, "Father, mother, I do understand what you are saying, and I would be inclined to agree with you if not for the facts what father told just now." Ned, confused, asked Harry, "What did I say?" Harry smiled. "You are right," he started. "This won't be a war really. A few battles here and there. Our main headache would be the reaving and raping the Ironborn commit on the mainland. That is why I will have the winter wolves stationed at our western border to slaughter any Ironborn with impunity. As for me riding out with you for war, father, I completely agree that I should not be involved in war unless I have to be. But the Starks have been summoned, and this would be a great opportunity to meet the other great houses and sense their intentions towards the North," I said calmly. as after the final Blackfire rebellion lead to friendships and alliances that led to your fostering in the Vale and later on the alliance of the Arryns in King Robert's rebellion. So father, I request you to let me ride with you to Lannisport. Harry stated earnestly. No, Harry, you are too young, insisted Catelyn, as she did not want her child to ride out for war. Ned looked at Harry, seriously evaluating his words. His words did have sense, and as the second son, him going would make a statement that the next generation of Starks had a leader and a commander who were brothers in blood. Harry was desperately trying to make the lives of Northmen better. While Robb would be the Lord of Winterfell while he was away, Harry would be able to make alliances and friendships with the other houses. Reluctantly, he agreed to Harry's request. Catelyn glared at him as he said, "All right, Harry, we set to ride in 2 days' time. We are traveling to Moat Cailin to join up with the rest of our banners before we proceed to Lannisport." Harry nodded and left the room, leaving the adults to discuss other important matters. He went to his quarters, where he opened the drawer next to his study. Within the drawer was a medallion made out of gold. The medallion had small alphabets which were there side by side and could be changed with a button on the edge of the medallion surface on the side. Harry sent a coded message and pushed another button. He felt warmth in his hands as the medallion heated up slightly and then cooled down eventually. That night, hundreds of people from the villages across from Winterfell started riding towards the capital as they were summoned by their lord. The Winter Wolves were on their way. Village of Snowcrest, 289 AC, Alphen's POV. He finished up his work for the day as he slowly went towards the recently made tavern in the village. The tavern keeper was an old, battle-hardened commander who had fought in Robert's rebellion. Whitebeard Corran, they all called him. Corran would tell them stories from the war, the story of the Ruby Trident, the sacking of King's Landing, and even the stories from the tourney of Harrenhal. The ale was cheap and fresh, and the food was heavenly. The cook Corran had at the tavern was one of the best cooks in the village, and everyone loved the meat pies she made. The Leaky Cauldron, Corran had named, or the Lord Stark had named the establishment as such, saying that because it would always overflow with ale. He was not wrong. The tavern became a regular go-to place, and even the women of the village could come to the tavern for their drinks. Corran served wine which came cheap to him, and the ladies just loved their wines. Alphen looked down at the clothes that he was wearing. It was cotton and light and of such good quality. The clothes mill which had opened in the village, where large wooden contraptions were used to churn cotton to cotton cloth, which was then made into lightly woven clothes. The villagers all look well-fed and well-clothed, and Alphen could really say that their homeland was prospering. He sent a silent prayer, thanking the old gods for the miracle that was the young Lord Stark. Lord Harlan was a young boy of no more than 10 name days when he first came to the village. Flashback. Alphen was a hunter then. He used to hunt the forests and used to bring back what he could for his mother and younger brother. It hardly used to be enough. But the North was a harsh place, and going to bed without supper so that others could eat was a thing few had the strength to do. He was talking to the village elder, he remembered, as the young boy lord approached him, accompanied by what seemed the master at arms and the maester of Winterfell. "My lord, Byron," the village elder, kneeled. "It is fortunate that you have graced us with your presence. How can we be of help?" asked Byron. The master-at-arms looked at me with Alphen with a stern look, and Alphen immediately kneeled, cursing himself for his stupidity mentally. But the young lord paid no heed to my apparent lack of respect. "How does the village?" he asked quietly to Byron. Byron looks at the maester nervously, who smiles encouragingly at him. "My lord, the people here suffer. With the land mostly brittle and the weather too harsh, we fear many would not survive the coming winter." The young boy lord listened to the old man with his full attention, and then he said, "Do any of the folk here know masonry or has prior experience in making buildings?" Byron, not understanding the question, shook his head and said, "We have men who can do hardy and laborious work, but I am afraid, my lord, that we do not have many skilled workers here." "How many men can you spare?" asked the boy lord. "They will be paid 5 dragons a month. 2 for the first month, as they will be taught at Winterfell, and food and lodgings would be provided for them." Byron looked unsure, as the offer seemed too good to be true. It wouldn't be right to raise the hopes of the poor and the hungry just so that a boy lord to play at being one. He was thinking of refusing, but he saw the boy lord looking at him, and somehow he knew that the young lord had understood his reservations. A fortunate thing indeed that I happened to have some gold with me. He took out a large bag and handed it over to Byron. The old man's eyes widened as he felt the weight of the bag. Maester Luwin will tell you of the details, the boy lord said as he walked towards me. My lord. Alfin bowed my head and kneel, not knowing what a lord would want from him. Rise and tell me what work is it that you do? Lord Harlan said. I'm a hunter, my lord. I scour the forests for rabbits and all the dot, he mumbled. You must be good at foraging and hiding in the forests then, the young lord surmised. Alfin nodded. Come to Winterfell, the young lord said. I have a need for guards, who can move as stealthily as a wolf while hunting their prey. He took out another bag and took out a handful of coins. He handed them to Alfin and told him, Bring them to Winterfell, the other hunters. I have provided the elder with the coin. This is extra for you for rounding a good number of hunters. The young lord smiled. Alfin bowed as he saw in his wealth he had never seen together in his life. In a week's time, around 400 men, old and young, had taken the money and had reached Winterfell. 150 of them were hunters. Alfin rounding up as many hunters he could find. The money was good and there wasn't much food nearby to hunt. The rest were to be masons, builders, architects, and weavers. The builders left after a week back to Snowcrest as the training of the rest of the men started. Their lodgings were simple but clean. Their rations were enough to feed their hunger. The pay was as promised and always on time. The hunters, as Alfin was used to calling his group, were the ones who were drilled the most. Their training regimen was hard and their training masters were all the more hard on them. Discipline, mental fortitude, stealth, strength, and speed was drilled and honed and taught to them. As the days went by, Alfin saw more people joining their group as even more other people joined other trades to learn at Winterfell, and soon a year and a half had crossed and it was time for their final joining. Many had quit or were removed from their group as some of them didn't have the resolve to see it through as the regime was exceedingly brutal towards the end. The final 500 members gathered around the godswood that was here in the military district of the city. Lord Harlan Stark came striding towards us with several of the hunters of our group who had finished the regime before the rest of them. There were only 20 of them, but these men had proven to be the best warriors since the time of the Age of Heroes. They were called the Winter Wolves. The Winter Wolves and the Black Wolf, as the young lord was becoming famous, as these days were the dread of all bandits and raiders. The young lord was known to patrol extensively in bandit-infested areas and would clear them out with brutal efficiency. Lord Harlan Stark stood in front of the greatest weirwood tree and spoke, his voice brimming with hope and confidence. This has been such a productive time. I am very happy with all the dedication and hard work you have put in. Together we will strengthen the North. Everyone cheered at that, and now, I hereby officially induct you all into the Order of the Winter Wolves. Lord Harlan spoke clearly. Repeat the oath after me. We stand here as we become one with the North, our life and breathe in service of the realm. For winter is coming, and it promises darkness and death, as the swords and shields, the bows and arrows with which we hold the realms of men. As we pray to the old gods and say, Not today. Each of the members repeated the oath and Lord Stark gave them a medallion and asked them to drop a few drops of their own blood in it. As they offered the medallion to the old gods and then wore them on their necks, as Alfin sliced his thumb to let a few drops of blood fall on the pendant, he offered a prayer to the old gods and slowly wore the pendant. Power coursed through his body and he felt powerful. The power surged through him as he felt the blessings of the old gods course through his veins. The following 6 moons, Alfin patrolled and hunted and killed bandits with impunity. He himself had changed much over the years, and by the time he left for his scheduled leave of absence, as each winter wolf served for a period of 6 moons before being sent home to attend the needs of the family and to help and raise the villages they grew up in. When Alfin returned to his village after 2 years, he could not recognize the place. Lush green fields were brimming with crops as the farmers tended to them. The previously sparsely populated village was now brimming with activity. There was a marketplace in the village where all items grown in the village were sold. Alfin looked around as he saw the house which had been fortified, the new tavern that was bringing customers. He saw people in the villages happy and healthy. As he stood there in wonder, he saw his house which stood in its corner. The house had changed. The previous ramshackle hut was completely replaced by a building made of stone and wood. Alfin approached the house and his mother outside the house tending to the clothes that were washed. She looked hale and hearty. She looked up at him and smiled and came running hugging him tightly. That night as he went to sleep, thanking the old gods for all the good that happened to him, he made a solemn vow to serve Lord Stark forever, as he had not only saved his life and brought prosperity to it but also did it for his entire family and the village. End flashback. As Alfin entered the tavern, he could feel many eyes were upon him. Raymond and Derry, two other hunters who were fellow wolves, greeted each other warmly. Food and ale poured aplenty as the time went on and the bard kept singing one song after the other. It was close to night when Alfin reached his home. He felt slightly tipsy but nothing to worry over, he thought, as he clumsily entered his room. As he lay on his bed and was about to doze off, he felt the pendant on his neck grow warm as he heard instructions to be ready for Winterfell. Alfin and 50 others left their village the next morning, riding hard towards Winterfell. Much like Alfin, villages, towns, and holdfasts across the north, the wolves started to move towards Winterfell, and the ones close to Moat Cailin made their journey there.
Winterfell, 289 actini, natspeo bebasha.
Ned saw Harry leaving and let out a deep sigh. His son was sometimes entirely too good at refuting arguments. It was difficult to tell him otherwise when he usually suggested the most pragmatic course of action. Rubbing his temple, Ned asked Maester Luwin both Robb and Jon, and the Maester nodded before leaving his solar to collect his sons. Catelyn was looking angry and resigned at the same time. Ned shook his head. His thoughts went back to his second son. Flashback. During Harry's 5th name day, upon being asked what he would like as a gift, he told me seriously to buy him 3 taverns in Winterfell, Barrowtown, and White Harbor. I was bemused and paid no heed to his words, thinking the idle words of a child. As the day approached his end, he approached me and asked me when he would be able to see his gifts. Against my better judgment of what I felt at that time, I went ahead and bought him those 3 taverns. How wrong I was. By the time of Harry's 7th name day, the 3 taverns had already made Harry quite a lot of money. Money which I thought he would spend frivolously as would any child. But not Harry. He slowly started off pouring more money into the trade caravans and the merchant guilds in the north. As the trade of the north prospered, so did the people. As I went across the land to meet several lords, I saw the barren and desolate land of my forefathers changing, slowly but surely. As the years went by, the bandit infestation decreased as Harry made his personal company of rangers, the winter wolves he called them, hunt down bandits with impunity. Each year, the small folk prospered, which led them to paying more tax, which indirectly enriched the lords of the north. Harry's knack for creating and stabilizing ideas into reality was something that the north was grateful for. The small folk loved his son. Harry was a pride to the Starks in every way. End flashback. He was broken out of his reverie as Robb and Jon entered the room with Master Luwin. "Father," spoke Robb, "you summoned us. Is everything all right? Where is Harry?" "Me and Harry are leaving in a week's time for Lannisport. The king has summoned his banners. We will be traveling to Moat Cailin to meet up with our bannermen before we head to Lannisport," Ned stated. Robb looked mutinous and Jon looked, but Ned raised his hands. "No, stop. There always has to be a Stark in Winterfell, and with me gone, you will be the Lord of Winterfell, Robb," Ned stated firmly. He looked at Jon. "Harry did not say about taking you with us, and I would not have agreed also, but I think he does have some work for you with the Winter Wolves." Jon nodded, eager to contribute for his brother. "Good, now let us all go to the Godswood and pray that this war ends sooner than later," Ned said gravely as they all went towards the Godswood. As they entered the Godswood, Ned saw his son Harry, sitting within the branches of the weirwood, with a flute in his hand, made of weirwood. As Harry started to play the flute, the most melodious, melancholic and heart-wrenching notes escaped the instrument. All of us stood there, captivated by the melodious tunes which threatened to make you cry, but were so beautiful. Ned's worries for his family, the future, his sons and daughters, Jon, all seemed to melt away as Ned felt being one with the tune. As the song came to an end, Harry slowly ended it on a high note and then opened his eyes, and Ned could see his green eyes looking at him. In that moment, Ned realized that Harry had eyes which would mostly belong to an older person. The weariness, the sadness, the resigned acceptance that would flicker by. Sometimes Ned wondered how their 14-year-old son had eyes which seemed more tired and weary than his own. He truly wondered. As the days went by, bannermen of the North and under the Starks gathered. The bannermen, along with the lords of House Glover, Mormont and Umber, assembled in Winterfell. House Glover of Deepwood Moat was a noble house from the Wolfswood in the north of Westeros. Their ancient seat, a wooden castle, was Deepwood Moat. Their sigil, a silver-armored fist on a scarlet-red background. Galbart Glover had arrived with 1,000 men. Lord Galbart was a steady and loyal man, and served as a loyal vassal to the Starks. He was a hardened warrior and he seemed very tactful. House Mormont ruled Bear Island. House Mormont's sigil showed a rampant black bear on a white field, surrounded by a green escutcheon. Jorah Mormont, the son of Jeor Mormont, had arrived at Winterfell with over 400 men. Bear Island was a gift to the Mormonts from the Starks after King Roderick Stark had wrestled and won the rights to the island from the Ironborn. Perpetually loyal as vassals, the Mormonts of Bear Island were tough, hardened warriors. Jorah Mormont seemed a joyful young man and was deferred to my father as well as to Harry. House Umber of Last Hearth guarded the northern areas of the region, north of which lay Castle Black. Lord John Umber, or rather known as Great John, for his hulking figure was a beast of a man. Towering over the rest, his laughter would boom on the halls, and sometimes his loud gasps and laughs would startle the serving people at Winterfell. He had brought 1,000 men with him. The Umber sigil was a roaring giant, brown-haired and wearing a skin, with broken silver chains on flame red. These were the loyal bannermen of his father. Robb thought solemnly as he saw the last group of people who had assembled. The Winter Wolves. The commander of the Wolves, Kraken, was an unassuming figure. But his commands and his directions were obeyed by the Wolves without a question. Kraken had arrived and had knelt and pledged his oath to my father to serve the Starks in perpetuity. My father had accepted graciously. Robb had read the reports of the patrols and the stories from the merchants and the small folk in the taverns. The Winter Wolves would patrol the harsh north, surviving their patrols mostly foraging and hunting, as they would often patrol the barren lands and rarely would they patrol around the populous places. They hunted thieves, outlaws, and bandits. Many merchants had been saved from being looted and worse, as well as villagers and peasants while traveling the roads. Many a lord had been thankful to his father. He had read their letters, thanking his father and his brother for their establishment of this order. The Wolves, as Harry would refer to them, has tales and songs written about them. What was once a group of men his brother had scoured from villages with promises of a better life, which he did provide. Soon enough, with the fame of the Wolves and their tales of bravery, led many men to Winterfell to join the ranks of the order. Harry had refused to take in people of noble birth, stating that it would cause undue tensions with the house if they lost their sons in the service of the realm, and their father was also well inclined to agree with Harry. Robb was looking onto the map on Winterfell in his study. Harry had told him that he had 1,200 men provided to Robb to bolster the western coast. Robb looked at the reports as he saw that another 600 wolves were patrolling the north. As he delved deeper, he saw that Harry had these wolves patrolling most of the villages and holdfasts of the north, presumably to deter any bandit, outlaw, or wildling raids. Their western coasts, however, would be stretched too thin if he proceeded to send large patrols to fortify the coasts. He had read that the Ironborn were notorious for smaller raids and diverting main armies and making skirmishing attacks to enter the villages and holdings to rape, raid, and pillage. He read the reports on the wolves again. The wolves were excellent hunters and foragers. They were swift and hardy men, able to travel long distances. They would be the most excellent scouts in a war with their capabilities. Robb started to formulate a plan. Instead of sending out large patrols, he thought of breaking patrols between 30 to 50. This would give him enough patrols to protect and throw off any attack from the Ironborn. He would reinforce the guard on the villages on the western shore. He could stop any attack if they raided the villages or any place with large numbers, but unsuspecting farmers could be attacked and brutalized by the Ironborn. He looked at the map again, thinking as he looked at the station patrols on his map. Robb felt angry. These Ironborn would attack the villages of the north, looting, raiding, raping with impunity. They harmed and slaughtered people who did not harm them. He shook his head. He was not thinking clearly. He thought. He needed to use the wolves to hunt these scum. He thought more as he read the reports on the winter wolves. He stayed up late that night, working and perfecting his plans. The following morning he was up and ready, a little excited and nervous about his plan as he had made this one all on his own for the first time. Today was when his father and brother were leaving. He wanted to tell them of his plans. He wanted to know if Harry and his father approved of his plans. As he walked to the castle courtyard, he saw his father dressed in his armor and his cloak, with the great sword Ice hung across his back. He saw his brother Harry wearing armor which was a strange amalgamation of leather, chainmail and steel plate. They were dyed black as his swords were hung across his back. As I approached them, I heard them talking. "Don't worry, father," Harry was reassuring my father. "We have enough wolves in the north to defend it. I have stationed and garrisoned patrols in all villages and holdfasts, just so that bandits or outlaws from the south do not get any ideas. Also, Robb will be taking care of the western shore. Trust me, father. We can assure our bannermen that we have nothing to be afraid of." Harry saw me approach and smiled at me. "Robb, glad you are here. Please tell father that he is being too broody and severe." Robb wanted to laugh looking at the way dynamics of his father and brother. He shook his head and focused. "Harry," he said, "I made a few changes in the deployment of the patrols." I handed him the map where I had made the changes. "Let me know if you think this would help." Harry opened the scroll and saw the map. Robb could see Harry's eyes lighten up in recognition of what he had done. Harry looked up from the map, handed it to his father and winked at Robb. Robb saw his father looking into the map with interest. His father's face was impassive as he read through the map. He finally looked up at Robb and saw several emotions flicker through his father's eyes. Astonishment, relief,
Pride.
love. His father grasped his shoulder and told him with a smile, "This looks excellent, Robb. You are the protector of the north now. I wish you well." Robb solemnly grasped his father's hand and said, "I wish you good fortune in the war." He repeated the same with his brother. Harry hugged him. As Robb returned the hug, Robb mumbled, so that only Harry could hear, "Stay safe and thank you, brother." Harry pulled back and smiled at me. I saw John standing at a distance waiting for his time to say farewell to Harry and father. I beckoned him as I saw Harry also do the same. As we barreled into a three-way hug, laughing, we made our vows to each other as brothers. Soon the time for farewells ended as Harry and my father, Lord Eddard Stark, left for war, leaving Robb to guard the north, his homeland.
Winterfell 289 actini Jones POV baixa.
Jon saw his father and brother leave Winterfell with their bannermen. Robb was standing next to him, looking a little lost. He shook his head and looked at Jon and said, "I have the patrols drawn up. You have been to a few patrols in the last few moons. I want you to serve with Raymond, who will be the captain. Keep this map with you and study it, as it will help you to understand how we will better defend the north." Jon looked at the detailed map. There were to be units of 3 men scattered across, as we could see, all over the western coast. From Flint's Finger until Bear Island, the patrols were scattered. He could see patrols of 30 to 50 men were placed at strategic locations, and the heaviest patrol would have only 100 men, with only 4 patrols being that large. The routes indicated that the larger patrols would be moving around constantly and be moved in with a moment's notice to reinforce an area. Jon looked more carefully as he saw the strategy that was outlined on the map. The 3-member units would act as scouts primarily. Upon scouting enemies, one of the members would ride to reinforce men to one of the larger patrols, who would be at most 10 to 15 miles away. Until then, the 2 wolves would opt guerrilla tactics and sow confusion amongst the Ironborn. If a greater force was seen, which was unlikely, they would send a force of 100 wolves to subdue the threat. Jon had read that the Ironborn preferred to band into smaller units after reaching the shore to raid and pillage. Putting patrols and setting up ambushes at strategic positions would help them immensely. He looked up at Robb. Jon said, "Brother, this is quite detailed." Trade would not stop and the merchant caravans and villagers can travel safely even when the lords are not on their lands and most of the bannermen away. Robb smiled and said, "Well, I have to thank Harry for having the men to accomplish this. Also, you ride out tomorrow. I would suggest you go to Stony Shore. I do not believe the Ironborn will sail much to the north. Sea Dragon Point would be another point to check, but you will be able to sight those ships if they haven't already sailed by. Good luck, Jon." He finished as he hugged his brother. Jon hugged his brother back. As they parted, he saw Lady Catelyn approaching them. He bowed and left the courtyard to pack his equipment. As he walked towards his room, unconsciously his thoughts were on Lady Catelyn. Lady Catelyn had never rebuked him, told him off or raised a hand on him. Not since the day many years ago. Jon could understand her attitude towards him but couldn't appreciate it nonetheless. She never outright spoke to Jon and Jon was fine with that. He saw Arya trying to sneak into his room as he got there. Seeing Jon, Arya's face lit up as she babbled about all the things she had been doing. Jon listened on with a smile on his face as he started to pack his equipment. Seeing Jon gathering his equipment, Arya asked, "Where are you going?" Her eyes wide and innocent. Jon came up to Arya and kneeled in front of her as he said carefully, "Robb has asked me to patrol the north. I leave tomorrow." Arya looked at Jon as she looked sad. "Tell me what's bothering you?" Jon asked gently. "Father's gone, Harry's gone. Now you are going too." She huffed, looking adorably cute to Jon, as she huffily crossed her arms. "Noon tells me anything. I could not even say goodbye to Harry properly as I had to go for my lessons," she ranted, her face turning red as she seemed close to tears. Jon took his little sister in his arms and hugged her. Arya was fighting her tears as she hugged her brother tight. "I don't want you to go," she mumbled. Jon put his sister down and made her sit on his bed as he sat next to her. "Father and Harry have gone to war," he said softly, as he saw Arya's eyes widen. "I do want to go, and not only because Robb told me to," he said. "We are at war and the Ironborn would harm our people if I do not go and try to help in the cause. We have to defend our land, our family." He finished. "You know why?" he smiled. "When the snows fall and the white winds blow, the lone wolf dies, but the pack survives," finished Arya. She proceeded to then hug her big brother as hard she could. Jon once used to dream of his mother, he thought as he hugged his sister. His mother coming to take him away and he would leave Winterfell, leave the scorn, the hate, the ridicule. Then everything changed. Now, as he looked down at his little sister who loved him with all her heart, he thought about Harry, his father, Robb, Sansa, Bran and the baby Rickon and even Lady Catelyn. He was home. Winterfell was his home. And he loved his family. We would do anything to protect his family from harm.
Winterfell, 289 actini, Catelyn POV baixa.
I saw with a heavy heart as my husband and second eldest left for war, the bane of humankind. I cursed Balon Greyjoy for forcing the hand of Westeros to deal with the rebellion. With the burning of Lannisport, the Iron Fleet of the Ironborn was able to assault the western coast of the continent with impunity. The Ironborn were the most treacherous and vile of people. They reaved, raped, and plundered and called it the old way. Although the raids of the Ironborn had lowered after King Robert's rebellion, Balon Greyjoy had clearly recalled his forces to consolidate his forces before declaring rebellion. I did not know how long the war would go on for and if I would lose my family. I had learnt that my father was sending my brother as the lord of his host as the Riverlands forces marched to meet the king's host. Many in the south tell tales of glory and riches in war, lies and fanciful tales for fools, for only a bard can make a war seem glorious. War was chaos, no matter which king, lord, or rebel courts war. No matter how justified the claim or obnoxious the reasons, the result remained the same. Innocents were slaughtered in the war. Peaceful villages, where hard-working farmers and peasants toiled hard, would be ravaged, their men slaughtered, their women raped and their children sold, captured or murdered in a brutal manner, for no fault of their own. Such was the way of the world. I saw my eldest instructing Jon, as the boys then hugged and Jon saw me, stiffened and left after bowing. I realized that even after all these years, while I had to manage to rein in my chagrin at the boys' baseborn status, I could not seem to trust him. I had heard too many a tale of a bastard usurping their rightful brothers or their heirs that it made me wary. I was coming to realize that acting on prejudices could harm our family, as I had seen how the three brothers had come to care for each other. I had not seen such a great bond amongst brothers, that too when one of them was baseborn. As Robb approached her and they walked towards the hall together, her mind was on her son, the acting Lord of Winterfell. Robb, while having favored his Tully side physically, was the most who resembled their father in nature. Robb was honorable and just and took his duty to his family severely. He had dined with their bannermen and had spoken to all of them politely, and lords happened to like him. Great John Umber was very approving of Robb. I saw Robb instruct Maester Luwin to send a raven to Moat Cailin to inform the bannermen awaiting there that their lord was on their way. He also instructed the Maester to pass on several points regarding patrols, as Maester Luwin nodded and hurried away to send the raven. As Robb kept administering his duties as lord, my mind again went back to my family. I thought of my husband, the Quiet Wolf as he was called. Ned and I were not two people who were meant to be married, but we did for the sake of our families. After these many years, being the Lady of Winterfell, I had come to love my husband fiercely as I could. I prayed to the old gods that my son and husband were returned to me. A mother does have their weaknesses. It is difficult for them to say no or cause unhappiness to their own children. And although I would never admit it if anyone were to accuse me of it, Harry was the one who was the closest to my heart. I had lost him once and I feared to lose him again. But I had come to know my son. They sang songs about the deed of the Black Wolf. Harry was a warrior and a savior. Where in the south the knights squabbled and fought amongst themselves for fame and glory, my son would clear bandits' camps and save villagers and merchants from certain plunder, torture, or death. Harry had also had successfully increased their wealth almost tenfold within these few years, and he was just a boy of 10 and 4 name days, barely. She hoped for his bright future as she entered the Godswood to pray for her family. She made sure to pray for Jon from that night. Harry's POV. They had marched the past few days, meeting the patrol at Cerwyn. They had proceeded towards Moat Cailin with not much of interest happening. They committed to a regular routine and traveled long distances to shorten their journey. As he had his father rode together, suddenly Ned spoke. I have been thinking about something since the time we left for Winterfell. Am trying to understand how you were able to deploy an additional 1,500 men for Robb. Did you think we would need the men? How long ago did you realize this? Harry nodded, looking at his father. With the patrol reports from the last 3 years, we saw that there were some raids from the Ironborn, but they were not coordinated assaults. Then the reavings stopped completely. Ned nodded, motioning Harry to continue. The wolves mentioned in their reports that they had seen the Ironborn ships, in increasing numbers, patrolling the Sunset Sea and even traveling as far as to Bear Island. Suddenly Ned understood. You took that as a sign of them making note of the strategic points to invade or raid in the future. But how did you manage to get them trained so quickly? Harry said, my investments in the merchant guilds have helped me gather a large portion of the funds. We have done very well, and I have a hold in most of the merchant guilds in North, the Riverlands and the Crownlands. We will be possibly looking to trade in the future with Bravos. He continued, I increased the recruitment intake of recruits and through the merchant guilds across the realm that the Winter Wolves would be providing escorts, merchant guilds, and caravans. The wolves had already developed a reputation of killing bandits with no mercy and were readily sought after. The fresh recruits went with a few older ones on several such missions, and in 3 years, you would have enough men. Ned finished. Harry grinned and nodded. You are thinking beyond this war.
Ned surmised.
Harry smiled. There is no way this war ends in any way apart from the Greyjoys being torn apart. So we do fight and protect the North, but if we do not panic and keep your calm, our tactical advantage will beat them into submission. What I am interested in more is how the rest of the world sees us, father. We shall talk on this later then. Ned nodded his head and Harry agreed. Harry could groan. He was bored. They reached Moat Cailin after a week, and seeing the huge dilapidated structure, Harry was disappointed. The famed Moat Cailin, which defended the north from the Undulls, was a broken tower now, a pale shade of its former glory. They were in a deplorable state, and the entire structure was entirely too ruinous, according to Harry. The banners for Karstark, Bolton, Manderley, Serwyn, Glover, Mormont, Hornwood, Dustin, Umber, Flint and Slate could be seen, as well as the banner of the Starks. His father had earlier informed the lords of the deployment of the Winter Wolves. Their bannermen were quite pleased with the defensive plan that Robb had planned. Harry saw all the lords appreciating and praising his father, but he did notice the Leech Lord looking at his father with calculating eyes and a touch of respect. Roose Bolton was a severe man. He was cold and calculating, and his responses were measured and accurate. Harry could see the distaste and disgust Roose felt for him in his eyes. He had read about the Red Kings and their flayed stark-skinned cloaks. The man had murdered and hanged a peasant for not seeking his permission to marry, and then had proceeded to force himself upon the struggling girl under the very tree he had hanged the man. He had filled his seed inside the struggling girl who had borne him a bastard. Harry really felt like throwing up hearing the tales of the Leech Lord. He had a very bad feeling about Roose Bolton.
Stun xora, 289 actini, dunstan drums peo bebasha.
The longships had sailed to the north, where it had been decided they would land at Stony shore. The 300 Ironborn under him would then split into smaller groups, reaving and plundering throughout the north. The Iron Fleet had beautifully burned Lannisport. He heard that Euron Greyjoy had himself lit up the flagship of Tywin Lannister. Lord Drum laughed. True to the words of their king, Westeros was ruled by a boorish king who found more pleasure in his wine and whores than his realm. Lord Drum would reave and pillage the north and leave behind a legacy greater than the Red Kraken. Lord Drum wanted to capture some of the noble ladies and make them his salt wives. He loved it as he took them, as he felt their disgust, but unable to do anything as he took what he wanted. He promised his reavers that they could take any woman as long as they could kill their men. They soon neared the shore and disembarked. The few people of the north, peasant women and fishermen who were working near the shore, were surrounded by the Ironborn. They tried to desperately escape, but they found no way out. The men tried to fight as the Ironborn slaughtered them one by one. The men slaughtered, Lord Drum proceeded to make salt wives of the captured women. The 300 Ironborn took the iron price from the captured women, and by the time they left, there was only the broken dead bodies of the men and women whose faces told the excruciating moments they endured in their last moments. As the Ironborn dispersed towards the mainland, they did not see a solitary figure moving faster than them towards a patrol of 50 wolves, not 2 miles away. The combined forces of the northern men did not stay at Moat Cailin for long. After ensuring that the horses were fed, watered, and rested, they marched towards Lannisport. Around 35,000 Northmen marched through the King's Road, and the banners of all the houses of the north were displayed proudly. As they passed through the Neck, the land of the Crannogmen, the lands of his father's southernmost bannermen, Lord Howland Reed. The Crannogmen were a reclusive lot of people, and there were tales of how they had intermarried with the children of the forest, which caused their diminished stature. They were poor people, surviving mostly from hunting, and it was most likely poor nutrition which had a major part to play. Harry was always curious about Lord Reed, as he had visited Winterfell a few times to meet with his father. One such time, Lord Reed had narrated to him, Robb and Jon, about the story of the Knight of the Laughing Tree. Harry was curious, so he had met with the Crannogmen on his patrols across the north. They were reclusive and a little primitive, their villages and their people, but they were loyal and hardened people who had to fight to survive. Despite their smaller stature and crude weaponry, they were some of the fiercest warriors and hunters Harry had seen. The Crannogmen lived in the swampy marshland in the Neck and could be absolutely ruthless as a guerrilla warfare unit, should the North ever needed to stop an invasion from the south. Harry had proceeded to help the Crannogmen with a few of their difficulties. Providing and asking them to cultivate rice had worked wonders for the Crannogmen, as they used the advantage of the swampy land for their paddy fields. He had given them superior weapons, with steel-tipped arrows and castle-forged swords, spears and axes. Lord Reed had been immensely grateful, and he had introduced Harry to his family. Lady Diana Reed was very welcoming and warm, and the children Mira and Jojen were happy children. Harry had felt a strange feeling and aura from the young boy, much as he had felt the same feeling from many of the other Crannogmen. It was not a normal feeling. It felt familiar and distant at the same time, something extraordinary, something magical. Harry always had dreams since he was a child. He dreamt of another black-haired, green-eyed boy who looked a little too skinny and wore clothes that were too large for him. The boy wore something on his eyes, which had round edges, and it was on the bridge of his nose. He mostly seemed unassuming apart from a scar on his forehead, which was disturbingly noticeable, and his green eyes like his own. Harry had seen the other boy who was strangely called Harry too, and his friends a boy and a girl as they went to a magical castle and learnt magic and spells and raced on brooms. Harry had as a child been very confused and sometimes scared of the dreams. The dreams seemed ludicrous, but their continuity on such a regular basis was a mystery. Some of the things the boy had to face made Harry shudder. Harry loved his family. He loved and respected his father, Lord Eddard Stark. His father was a just and honorable man, a man as Harry had come to realize very quickly in this world few chose to be. He wasn't ambitious, but a man who took his honor and duty very seriously. His father was known as the Honorable Ned Stark, the Quiet Wolf. His mother, Lady Catelyn Tully, was the daughter of Lord Hoster Tully, the Lord Paramount of the Trident and the Lord of the Riverlands. House Tully's words were family, duty, honor, and Harry's mother had been brought up by these ideals and had instilled the same in her sons and daughters. She was cold towards Jon initially, which had turned into resigned acceptance. Harry had understood her not wanting to be around Jon, but the coldness and the harshness with which she would treat Jon would upset Harry a lot in his early days. Flashback. Harry remembered the day she had struck Jon. He had felt so much anger and sadness. He had moodily declined to have supper and had gone to his room. He felt so angry. Unknown to him, his eyes were flaring up as the power locked within him struggled to break free. Harry screamed as he felt the power coursing through him. He then felt a foreign presence trying to leech his power, trying to drain him until he would be a husk. His own power flared, trying to fight the foreign presence as Harry struggled to stay on his feet. His head spinning, he fell face forward and knocked his head on the side of his head. He fell unconscious on the floor bleeding. As his blood oozed from the wound, some of the blood started to dry out, and finally it disappeared, leaving a dark stain on the garment Harry was wearing. The attack of the foreign presence subsided and the power around Harry swirled and settled into him. Inside his mind, scenes flashed by Harry as he turned restlessly, his body burning up with fever. Harry lived as Harry Potter, felt his raw emotions, felt his desperation, his hopelessness and his continued struggle against evil. He saw the deaths of his parents, friends, and even his own family. The memories continued to wash on him as he realized that he had to protect his family. He felt the foreign connection to his magic seas, and his magic settled within him, flowing through his body. As Harry tried to regain consciousness, he felt Jon's voice. He followed the voice and he could see Jon and Robb in the Godswood, praying for him. He felt his magical energy flare up again as he once again lost consciousness. He awoke in his body, much to the amazement of Maester Luwin. The days following, he heard whispers of how he had been blessed by the old gods. When he saw the mark of the Deathly Hallows on the tree, he was sure that he had been given this power to protect his family. As the days went by, Harry began exploring his magic and poring over books, trying to find anything that remotely spoke of magic. He tried casting a few spells which naturally came to him, but the spells fizzled out as soon as they were released. His other avenue, the mind arts, was something he had relative ease of access. However, while he could sense emotions, he could not read the minds of people. He could tell when someone was lying, but he could not use legilimency on them to find out what they were lying about. He could, however, organize his mind in a far efficient manner. Something he had always struggled with, and he continuously used to practice meditation regularly to be able to acquire the near-perfect recall a Master Occlumens possessed. He needed a few more years to completely master it. This indirectly helped him in experimenting with ancient runes. Over time, he was able to hypothesize that his magic was not fizzling out but had been redirected towards the wall. Harry kept tinkering with magic. He realized he could not use it on another person. He tried casting a tongue-tying curse on an unsuspecting guard but got nothing. He gave up after some time, dejected at his failure, and just went to his room and turned, intending to shut the door. The door suddenly shut on its own, with all the locks falling into place. Harry stared at his own hand, which was tingling due to the magic cast. He was getting frustrated with this. His prayers were answered, but it did happen due to an accident. He was trying to repair a crystal goblet, and as he cast the charm, the goblet fixed itself before again falling apart. As he was picking the glass pieces, he accidentally nicked himself a bit and some of the blood stained on the glass. He cast the charm again. The goblet stood as the pieces attached itself to the broken item seamlessly as it became whole. The goblet did not fall apart. Harry realized by delving into his knowledge of runes, he could create an array where he would drop the sacrificial blood and the magic would sustain, and another array where he would expect the results. Moreover, the runes and the blood magic ensured that the magic would not dissipate. He could replicate items with ease. He tried his hand at replicating gold. He was very surprised when he succeeded. Harry realized that Nicholas Flamel of his old world would roll in his grave if he realized that a drop of blood could literally replicate a substantial amount of gold. Harry knew that he could not just replicate gold without any explanation. He did not want to reveal his magic to people. He had read the dim view people had on magic, so he certainly didn't want to take any chances. So he had asked his father to help him buy 3 taverns. The taverns were made and Harry had overseen parts of the construction, whether to strengthen the foundations or to make the taverns seem more spacious from the inside without making it obvious. He had built on a complex array of runes and had also incorporated a localized cheering charm and a slight loyalty charm, which would build positive disposition towards the establishment over time. The taverns prospered over time. Harry encouraged the owners to add other amusements, inclusive of gambling during their functioning hours. The owners, as they stayed on the same property, had quickly grown loyal to Harry. It wasn't considered out of the ordinary, as Harry indeed had enriched them. As they made adjustments to hide the illegal betting of money and added more made-up avenues of wealth, it made it easier for Harry to fudge the numbers further as he multiplied his treasury. The North had only 3 towns and cities, with White Harbor, Barrowtown, and Wintertown. Harry wanted to open more taverns and inns across the North, but the North was a desolate and hard land. The North was sparsely populated and the people were poor, barely able to feed themselves throughout the year. His plan would work only if the population increased and there was more security during travel. He then began to pay outrageous amounts of gold to people to join him to work, as guards, as builders, as masons, miners, and other livelihoods of work. He had hired the Wild Hares, a northern mercenary group, to guard the villages while the Winter Wolves were formed. He then turned his attention to patrols, as merchants coming into the North with goods and materials were being harassed by bandits and outlaws. As the number of wolves grew, he enforced patrols across the made trade route points and permanently set up a post of 1,000 wolves at Last Hearth to deal with the wildling raids and attacks. Slowly, as the establishments were built and the people started to prosper, after a few years, he established a high tax on the people he was paying a ludicrous amount to from Winterfell, and an 80% tax was charged to the people working under him. From the tax he had separated a reasonable portion he would provide as pension for the old and the weak once they could not work further. He had further assigned another portion for building of houses and establishments in villages. Another portion was assigned to teach the children of the villagers and holdfasts different trades. Essentially, in a manner to hide his abilities, he proceeded to create several establishments and businesses which would muddy and derail the line of thought. He had further plans to expand the potential of the North, but for now, the North was better off than during King Robert's rebellion. Much better off. End flashback. The promise of a good pay for honest work drew many men and women to him. The northern population slowly increased as there was a slow trickle of people coming to settle in the North. The boost in population helped the North then train more soldiers, so the 30,000 men that were approaching Lannisport were not filled with green boys with pitchforks in their hands. The North had gathered 30,000 men, all of whom were veterans of either previous war patrols or had experience in fighting for a couple of years at the least. His father did not call in the levies, as he knew that the summertime could not be wasted in the North, and he made the decision to call upon only veterans for the war. Harry had future plans for the North. He had been replicating money and pumped it into trade. He had a fleet of ships made at White Harbor to trade with the free cities of Essos. He had pumped money into the caravans, giving them more security and better equipment. But he knew he had to involve the other lords to make the North stronger as a realm. He was broken off from his thoughts by Ser Wylis Manderly, who was riding next to him. "Lord Harlan," he said, "glad to see you again. I trust my father has not been haranguing you, has he?" He nervously laughed. "Oh no, not at all," Harry said. "I completely understand Lord Wyman's enthusiasm. I enjoy our conversations. They do often lead to a mutually beneficial outcome. Wouldn't you say so?" Ser Wylis laughed out loud. "Aye, that's true, my lord. You have a keen understanding of economics, is what my father says. He is truly happy that the North is tapping into its potential for growth." He started enthusiastically, before adding, "No disrespect to your father, my lord."
Harry smiled. "No."
"I understand what you mean. We have always survived. I want more. I want us to thrive and succeed. Your father is highly appreciative of that and is willing to work with the Starks in order to achieve such a goal." Harry then talked genially with Ser Wylis, talking about various things as they rode their way to Lannisport. Near Stony Shore, 289 AC, Jon's POV. The patrol was riding hard towards Stony Shore as they had heard the Ironborn had landed as per the scout's report. The captain of the group was a young man called Finn who had immediately sent out 3 more scouts to the other patrols to cut off the Ironborn and box them in, surrounding them from all sides. He then sent a raven to Raymond, his superior, who was patrolling 5 miles away with 200 men. The rest rode towards Stony Shore. The scouts of the party came back stating that the Ironborn were less than a mile away and a party of 50 men could be seen coming in their direction. Finn nodded and all the wolves began to equip their arms and began to gear up for battle. Jon readied his sword and shield as he adjusted his helm as the captain barked orders for formation. They readied themselves in ranks of 4 as Finn came towards the tail, beckoning Jon to follow him. "Now you haven't seen this, so follow me and only attack when I say charge, you got me?" Finn said seriously. Jon nodded, the oncoming battle on his mind as he felt a little bit of dread and nervousness which he shrugged off. They started to rush towards the enemy. Jon could see from a distance as he was riding that a small band of Ironborn was heading their way. "Start volley," Finn shouted. Jon saw the wolves, who had been all riding with their bows in their arms, had each almost in uniform fashion loose. He shouted and 50-odd arrows shot up in the sky traveling towards the Ironborn. The first volley of arrows skewered the Ironborn as while they saw the approaching riders, they did not expect such an attack. The second volley of arrows finished off the ones that did not manage to avoid the missiles or find cover. By the third volley, the Ironborn were in disarray as they were spread around land, trying to avoid the missiles breaking any paltry formation they had initially made. "Charge!" shouted Finn, as the wolves neared the Ironborn and smashed into the remaining Ironborn. The aerial assault had killed more than half the Ironborn, and against mounted cavalry who were disciplined, well-trained and experienced fighters, the Ironborn, outnumbered, stood no chance. Jon rode into battle as he charged and swung his sword at an incoming Ironborn. The completed its graceful arc as the man now fell to the ground, his head separated from his body. He saw some of the Ironborn trying to flee. "Don't let anyone escape as they will alert the other scum," Finn shouted, and a roar of approval came from the wolves. They proceeded to kill every single Ironborn present. "For the North!" Finn shouted as the wolves roared together the same chant.
Winterfell 289 actini, Rob's POV baixa.
Robb overtook the responsibilities of Winterfell like a fish to water. Over time, Robb had realized he had an interest in strategy and economics. Seeing his brother literally create wealth for himself that could make many a lord envious, he had also taken an interest in the same. He saw to the daily affairs that were required of a lord and listened to the small folks' complaints and tried to find reasonable solutions for them. His mother and Maester Luwin would sit on the proceedings with him and assist him. He also ensured that his skills with the weapon did not dull and started even more grueling methods to be quicker, faster, and more decisive in his fighting. It was very difficult and almost seemed tortuous to Robb, but he had begun to see the results of his training. He was getting more toned, and as he gained muscle, his strikes became stronger. He was training hard to also increase his stamina. "My lord," Ser Rodrik stated, "you have grown exponentially in the last moon. Your strikes have quicked and also strengthened, and you have also learned to adapt to sudden changes. Robb thanked the Master of Arms and proceeded to take a bath and freshened himself for the day. He sat down later to read on the reports on the economics of the North. Quite some time had passed and Robb heard a knock on his door. On answering to enter, he saw his 8-year-old sister Sansa coming into his room. Sansa. He greeted the little girl as the little red-haired girl came and sat in front of Robb. "Mother seems upset," she said. She did not speak much but retired to her chambers. "Father and brother are away, so she is understandably worried." Robb told her younger sister. "Where is Jon?" asked Sansa. "He is patrolling the north on the western would be at Stony Shore," Robb said. "Oh," was simply what Sansa said, not understanding completely. Robb then sat with his sister as they talked and Sansa gushed on, talking about her day and things, and Robb could put his mind to stop worrying for a few moments. They spoke for quite some time that day. Near Lannisport, Ned's POV. After a long and uneventful march, they had reached Lannisport. From afar Ned could see the huge walls of the town and the vast camp of the king that surrounded it. The banners of various houses and great houses of Westeros were struck up side by side on the walls of the city, and the camps which had the men of the respective houses. Arryn's, Lannister, Tully, Tyrell banners were vibrant, and the Baratheon banner was displayed in splendor. As their army reached the camps, they saw a small group of men approaching them with the king's banners. Stannis Baratheon, the king's brother, approached them. His retinue took to help the incoming party with the area to camp the northern banners. "Lord Eddard," said Stannis in his serious demeanor, "it is agreeable to see you. The king is waiting for you." "Prince Stannis," Ned greeted as he motioned Harry to join him. "This is my son." Lord Harlan greeted Stannis as Harry approached them. "Prince Stannis, I hope you are in good health," greeted Harry. Stannis motioned towards the camp as he led his way to the king's temporary camp. The king's camp had all of the high lords of Westeros, and they all stood there looking at them as they entered the tent. King Robert Baratheon, first of his name, king of the Undulls and First Men, the defender of the faith, the protector of the realm, and his friend and brother in blood, approached him. The years had not been kind to Robert. He had grown larger and fatter and did not look as fit as used to be. He still cut an impressive figure in his armor and the huge warhammer that was slung across his back. "Ned," roared the king in joy. Ned and Harry knelt in front of the king as the king approached them. "It is good to see you, your grace," Ned said. "Always the Honorable Ned Stark," laughed the king as he hugged his friend. "And this is your son, the Black Wolf?" asked the king. Ned looked surprised at this. Jon Arryn, the hand of the king, stepped in. "We have heard of his exploits in the north and the Riverlands. The peasants and the merchants do speak very highly of your son." Everyone looked at Harry, expecting him to respond, and he simply said, "I was only doing my duty, your grace and my lord. Tales told can often be a little exaggerated at times." He finished. Robert looked and Harry looked impressed, as did Jon Arryn. "So you have taken after your father. Ned, I am so happy. We also have more good news. Stannis has smashed the Iron Fleet, and now we can sail to the Iron Islands to smash those iron fuckers," Robert stated. Jon asked, "How was the North affected, Ned?" "There have been skirmishes in the past which we have taken care of. Ironborn have landed in the Stony Shore, but our patrols are taking care of them. We have a few villagers and peasants who have died, but for now we haven't received any reports of any major attacks." Jon Arryn nodded as he proceeded to tell Ned about the damages the Ironborn had wrought on the western coasts of the rest of the regions. The damages to the Westerlands and the Reach were considerable. Many villages and holds raided, many women taken as salt wives. Some of the ladies of the Reach and Westerlands had been kidnapped. There was a lot of outrage and hate for the Ironborn. Ned realized that by reaving and looting and causing harm to people who had never harmed him, Balon Greyjoy had given Robert the solidarity he never had until now. The lords wanted blood, and Robert was all too willing to give it to them, as war was something Robert could understand very well. By declaring rebellion, Balon Greyjoy ended up uniting Westeros. Now that the Iron Fleet had been destroyed, Robert would bring the full might of Westeros on the Iron Islands. Sometimes Ned wondered if Robert enjoyed destroying more than building. No, that was not right. He was entirely sure of it as he heard Robert give his speech to the army. They were leaving tomorrow and the Greyjoy rebellion would be stamped out. It was his honor and duty. Outside Lordsport, 289 AC, Harry's POV. The army of the Iron Throne had sailed towards the seat of the upstart Balon Greyjoy, the so-called King of the Iron Islands. King Robert had tasked his brother Stannis with capturing the island of Great Pyke, the largest of the Iron Islands. Stannis had sailed to Great Pyke with 40,000 men with him. Ser Barristan Selmy, the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, was sent to subjugate Old Pyke with 20,000 men. Another 40,000 were dispatched to the various smaller islands under the Lords of the Reach and Westerlands. King Robert had saved Pyke and Lordsport, the seat of the Pretender King, for himself and his best friend, Ned Stark. He had planned to burn Lordsport to the ground with over 100,000 men with him. Harry had trained since the time he had reached Lannisport. His endurance training would raise eyes from other veteran warriors, as while they had always strived to remain fit, they had not seen such a routine before. Harry had religiously practiced his swordplay. After he had attained magic, he had assumed that he could use magic in a more destructive manner if he chose to. But with the limitations and the blocks he faced in practicing magic efficiently, Harry had come to realize that he could not apply magic to steel. This had greatly frustrated him, as he could not enchant his weapons to be more deadly. Nor could he use it to reinforce armor made of steel, while his magic, always trying to protect him, would tell him where the strike was coming from, which Harry had further honed to almost pinpoint accuracy due to his advanced mental shields and occlumency. He was susceptible to attacks if he could not parry, block, or evade the strike in time. His magic did give him an advantage. He had theorized maybe it being a form or latent legitimacy, which told him the strikes to make and which ones to block, parry, evade, or counter. Harry looked down at his armor, which was mostly leather with steel plate and ringmail in strategic locations to offer maximum protection. He could apply charms to leather after stabilizing the magic, and had proceeded to layer his armor with enchantments and spells. He had applied comfort charms to ensure he could stay in armor under most weather conditions. He had engraved the leather armor with runes to replicate the unbreakable charm, and had put steel plates for added protection. He had covered the rest of his torso with ringmail. His legs were covered in enchanted leather, as strips of steel plate were around his thigh and nether regions. His boots, bracer, and gauntlets were all fortified to increase his maneuverability. In a pitched battle, his charms would wear out eventually and his leather armor would be susceptible to a lot of attacks. But Harry did not believe that it would come to that. We outnumber them 10-1, Harry thought, amazed at the stupidity of Balon Greyjoy. They had reached the shores of Lordsport and a small battle had ensued. The Ironborn were excellent sailors and reavers, and a large fleet could do a lot of damage in sea. But in land, they were merely unorganized savages who fought fiercely. Fierce the maybe, Harry thought as he parried a blow with his short before thrusting his right arm with his long sword into the chest of the Ironborn, killing him instantly. But against better equipped, well-armored and disciplined men who outnumbered them, the Ironborn stood no chance. They had quickly drawn up the siege engines. The catapults and the trebuchets had been fired, and a large part of the southern wall of the town had been reduced to rubble, allowing the vanguard to initiate the assault. They were followed by the rest of the army of the Iron Throne. The town of Lordsport was in total chaos. Ironborn were fighting and small skirmishes were occurring across the town. As there were many narrow alleys and roads, it somewhat created a bottleneck for the huge Iron Throne army. They overtook the walls and battlements of the town, and soon there was fierce fighting in the streets. The Ironborn were fierce, and they put up a strong resistance despite their disadvantageous number. They used cheap and dirty tactics to land lethal blows on their opponents. Harry dodged an axe thrown at him by one of the finger dancers, some of the elite Ironborn warriors. As he neared his opponent, dodging and ducking with his swords drawn, the finger dancer rushed at Harry with his two axes charging at him. Harry sidestepped the charge as he parried the blows with his short sword. His long sword came crashing on the neck of the Ironborn, decapitating him as Harry moved ahead as he dispatched two more opponents in quick succession. His father, fighting close by, was dispatching opponents with his greatsword ice with ease. His father did not make flamboyant moves but used the length of the greatsword to lethal advantage. The lightness of Valyrian steel made the swingers faster, quicker and more deadly. Harry watched with sight admiration as he stabbed his sword in the guts of another Ironborn while his father with a single swift movement decapitated his opponent. He saw King Robert, in his berserker epitome as the towering man slayed all that approached or challenged him, felling Ironborn with his huge warhammer. The king slammed his hammer onto an opponent's head, crushing his head before swinging it hard at another man's torso, caving in his chest. As the king dispatched his opponents ruthlessly and in such a brutal fashion, many of the Ironborn were hesitant to approach him in one-on-one combat. Robert was an exceptional military commander and had great charisma and strength. He rallied the men as they fought through the day on the streets of Lordsport, often shoulder to shoulder as the fighting spilled into the narrow lanes and streets of the town. The day wore on and the army under King Robert's command was pushing back the Ironborn resistance, slaughtering more and more of the Reavers slowly as the fighting continued. Harry slew another 3 Ironborn as they came charging at him, the Winter Wolves and other Northmen around him fighting as ferociously. As they killed the Ironborn and proceeded toward the gate of Castle Pyke, he saw more fighting in front of him. The Ironborn had outnumbered the small group who was fighting them, mostly the soldiers from the Crownlands. A knight in plated armor, who carried the sigil of a scythe and a peacock on his shield, was fighting and leading a group of Ironborn and attacking the soldiers from one end. The other flank was assaulted by Ironborn with Victarion Greyjoy himself leading the assault with his iron Kraken helmet. Armored in plate armor and his signature iron Kraken helm, Harry and his men attacked the Ironborn with the sudden reinforcement of soldiers pushing the Ironborn on the back foot. The knight, who was fighting quite fiercely, wielded a Valyrian steel sword which was elegant as well as deadly. The knight cut through 5 of the Crownland soldiers as Harry engaged him. Harry made an upward slash towards the knight's neck as the knight easily parried the slash and thrust his sword toward Harry's abdomen. Harry sidestepped and parried the slash before immediately whirling around and slashing towards his opponent's torso with both his swords hard. The knight staggered slightly as Harry pushed his advantage as he rained blows on his opponent. The knight parried his blows and tried to dodge a few as Harry managed to land a few minor cuts and bruises on his opponent. Harry blocked an overhead strike with his short sword as with his right hand he swung the longsword hard as the knight. The shield, which had taken considerable damage under Harry's assault, broke, disbalancing the knight. He hastily swung his sword as Harry stepped back to move out of the way. Harry kept relentlessly pushing his advantage and kept attacking the knight with his longsword, making use of his short sword to only parry some of the attacks. The knight was well trained as he matched Harry for blow by blow as he parried Harry's attacks with his Valyrian steel sword. Harry spun around and slashed at him again as the knight blocked the blows but had staggered again. Harry lunged forward and made to cleave the knight from collarbone to hip, left to right as he slashed diagonally down from the left. As the knight moved to block the blow with a two-handed grip, his eyes widened as he saw Harry's left arm and his short sword had followed moments after his initial strike. Just as the 2 long swords barely clashed together, the short sword sunk into the knight's unprotected throat. The knight coughed out blood as the sword pierced his neck, his long sword falling from his hands. He did not have much time to react as, with momentum, Harry spun around, his right arm making a horizontal backhand slash with his long sword, cleanly decapitating the knight. Harry felt drained as he felt the last fight had taken a lot of energy out of him. While he wasn't injured, he was beginning to slow. He really wanted the battle to be over soon. He saw as the soldiers around him fought and slaughtered the Ironborn. As he turned, he got hit by a face full of dust and sand. Choking and blinded by the sudden sneak attack, he could not defend himself properly in time as Victarion Greyjoy plunged a spear directly at Harry's chest. Winterfell, Catelyn's POV. It had been close to a couple of moons since her husband and son had gone to put down the rebellion of the Ironborn. Couple of moons since she had restless nights as nightmares and fears plagued her. Catelyn knew that, in their world, war was inevitable. Whether it be for a justified reason or a selfish cause, wars happened all the time. They were all seated in the great hall as the children Bran, Arya and Sansa came and sat with them as they finished some of their assigned work from morning. Septa Mordain and Maester Luwin had informed her that the children were learning quite well. Sansa, her 8-year-old daughter, had taken after her. She would excel at the work that was given to her, be it reading, writing, or learning, sewing and stitching. Sansa had grown up on tales of the North and the South, of the harsh winter and the barren land, of tales of knights and chivalry. Sansa had also adopted her silent disapproval of Jon, as she rarely used to speak with the boy. She was still young and Catelyn had great hopes of her. Her 5-year-old daughter Arya had almost nothing in common with her sister. Arya used to be attracted by the armor, swords, and such of the warrior and her father and brothers. Arya was especially close to Harry, and Jon could often be seen with those two whenever they were in Winterfell. Catelyn had told Ned about her worries, that no lord would accept a wife that willful. Ned had been amused, pointing out how adamant and rigid she could be when she brought up her own children. Catelyn had blushed in embarrassment. She had been worrying too much. Her Arya would be a strong and proud woman. She could also tell that Arya reminded Ned of Lyanna, and her distaste for the trappings of being a lady were similar to what Lyanna had felt about her own life. The poor and sad fate of her good sister had also made Catelyn be more careful with Arya, as she had realized that Arya did possess much of what Ned used to call as wolf's blood. Her son Bran was a shy and quiet boy who would be happy when he was with his brothers. The baby Rickon was in her hand as she sat on the table as her children came to the hall to break their fast. Her eldest Robb sat at the Lord's seat as he read through several reports as he broke his fast. Robb had gone and dispatched patrols on the entire north. As he had surmised, bandits had increased, but they were put down by the patrols. They had received reports that Ironborn had attacked Stony shore. As per the reports, around 1,500 Ironborn had landed onto their western shores, more of them unable to reinforce these men as the Iron Fleet was destroyed by the Roll and the Red Wine fleets. Catelyn knew that Robb was nervous for Jon. She had tried to assuage his fears. Even before the creation of the Winter Wolves, the people from the regions of Stony Shore had become hardy and unyielding as they had faced repeated onslaughts of Ironborn raiders. Catelyn was broken out of her reverie as Maester Luwin walked into the hall with a scroll in his hand. Robb was looking at the maester expectantly as he approached them and said, "We received a raven from the wolves. They had initiated the fight against the Ironborn. There is no cause for concern as they have reported that they have slowly managed to encircle the Ironborn and would be striking any day. They are sticking to guerrilla tactics to frustrate the Ironborn." Maester Luwin said, "Are the Winter Wolves so powerful?" piped up Arya. Maester Luwin and the Master at Arms Roderick Castle smiled. They knew about the little girl's fascination with arms and war. Maester Luwin answered, "They are indeed powerful. They are highly disciplined, conditioned to survive in the harshest conditions. They are also excellent hunters and scouts and excellent fighters. Their commander Kraken is a veteran and has trained his men well. But doesn't Harry own the wolves? Shouldn't he train them? Lord Harry is busy with several projects. He wouldn't have the time or the patience to sit and train young and green boys," Ser Roderick said. "That is why he has given that responsibility to me and Commander Kraken." "Maester Luwin," Robb said, "I read through the reports of the wolves. The scouts have reported mines in the northern mountains." "Indeed," Maester Luwin stated. "Lord Harry always suspected that the northern mountains had a lot of natural minerals which we could put to good use. He has plans to speak to the mountain clans to negotiate on this." Robb nodded. He had read through the journals that Harry had left him, and he was impressed at the detailed manner in which his brother had planned on making the North strong. He had plans to build roads, villages, better housing, more jobs, more trade and such. "We will discuss the allocation of funds for each of these projects. Once Father and Harry are back, we can have this approved by Father. It would speed up some of the things." Maester Luwin nodded. "Lord Harry had meant to involve you as he was going to put his plans in action. We can certainly discuss these projects, and we can even possibly begin a few of these within a fortnight." Arya was a little unhappy with the way the conversation changed to grown-up talk. She wanted to know. One of the stable boys had told her a tale of her brother, and she needed to know if it was true. "Are the tales they say about Harry are true?" she asked, filled with curiosity. She had read the stories of legendary knights like Ser Arthur Dane and Ser Eamon the Dragon Knight. The stable boy was full of awe when he had told her the story. She had to know if her brother was a hero. "Obviously they are true," said Sansa. "The people in Winterfell tell such tales of him. Even old Nan has a few stories about him. Sansa often used to dream of the knights of the South, with their chivalry and their customs. She used to dream of marrying a prince and being a princess. However, she did realize that her brother, while no knight was as loved by their people as her knights were loved in her stories. The reverence with which they spoke about her brother did make her feel special. If it was okay for Harry to act like a knight without being one, maybe it was not okay to be a princess as long as she acted like one. Catelyn saw her children and her family talking and exchanging stories. It brought a smile to her face. Her children were beautiful brothers and sisters who loved each other. They were boisterous and could be a handful times, but she could never be prouder of her children. The way they stayed together and had each other's back. Robb nodded to her as she, Maester Luwin and Ser Roderick Castle retired to her husband's solar to discuss more on the plans that Harry had made. Catelyn prayed that night again to the old gods for her family to be safe.
Stony xora, 289 actini, dunstan drums peo bebasha.
Lord Drum was frustrated. He could scream. He had led dozens of raids on the shores of the north. He had taken the iron price from these lands and its people for years. He knew that the people in these lands were tough, unyielding people who would fight fiercely to protect themselves. He used to be happy at this as it gave him the challenge of claiming what was his right. Never had he come across such a resistance. His initial band of 300 men had split up into bands of 50 as he waited for more 1,200 men to reach the shores. However, several of the parties returned with diminished numbers, claiming that they were routed by patrols. Many did not return. Thinking that a large force was coming, he had decided to move south and ambush the army. He sent a few scouts to scout the incoming army. They did not return. His southern flank was harassed by arrows as he tried to back out the approaching army. Finally, he had raided a small settlement which did not have many people to begin with and had fled upon seeing the Ironborn. He has set up their camp. After a few days during which they feasted on the foodstocks left by the fleeing peasants. During the night, the food stores of the settlement had caught fire, burning everything to ash. This had forced him to send out men to forage for food or to hunt. The men sent were hunted and killed, and from the initial force of 1,500 men that had arrived to plunder the north, 1,200 men remained. This morning he saw that the army of which he was hearing reports of had arrived. 400 men of the north were awaiting them a few hundred yards away from the settlement's back gate as the 600 men stood in front of the village in mounted cavalry. They were forcing a confrontation and a battle as the days went by. The food shortage became a serious problem. He had decided to kill these northerners, and once he was done with them, he could raise the rest of the western shore. He sent 300 Ironborn to skirmish and stopped the 400 men at the rear gate to flank them as he led the rest 900 Ironborn to battle with the larger host of Northmen. He was confident from his years of reaving and taking out bigger armies. What Lord Drum did not consider was the fact that he had never fought a battle with such a strategic disadvantage. He had his men trained to ensure that they could throw axes quickly at the mounted units, to fell their horse. Dislodged from their horses and disoriented, his men would make short work of the Northmen. Lord Drum was confident that the men were mostly fresh levies trained in a rush and hastily gathered by a northern lord to repel the Ironborn. He was going to teach these Northmen who had harassed him for such a long time a lesson. He would make each of them beg for death. Lord Drum would not be in a position to reflect on his poorly thought-out decisions as he was slaughtered the very next day by the bastard Jon Snow in single combat.
Lordsport, 289 actini, Harris peo bebasha.
Harry felt the impact on his chest as the iron spear pierced the metal plate with brute force. The protection on his armor and the steel plate had ensured that it was not a fatal blow as it would have been for any other person. Harry felt winded at the force with which he had been hit with. His chest hurt immensely as he did suffer some of the blunt force which had generated on impact. He rolled across the ground, getting up as he picked up his swords which had fallen when he was hit. He spat out a bit of blood. Victarion Greyjoy was standing and almost towering over Harry. While Harry was tall, Victarion was a bull of a man with broad shoulders, and he was armored in plate and mail. In his hand was a heavy axe, and on his other lay a shield. He wore a helm of iron in the shape of a kraken. The helm only exposed his eyes and the bottom part of his face, which had a vicious smirk. "I thought I killed you," he said as Harry swung his sword at him. Victarion blocked it easily with his shield, responding with a strong downward slash with his axe. Harry pushed back against the shield to gain some distance as he evaded the blows coming his way. "Silent one, I see," Victarion snarled. "I will make you scream," as he charged at him. Victarion was a fearsome fighter and would make unconventional strikes and moves which forced Harry to be defensive. The pain in his chest flaring up often Harry was quickly at a disadvantage against the elder Ironborn, one of the most experienced fighters of the Iron Islands. Distance and bashed Harry with the shield and hit him a few times and finally kicked him in the chest. Harry was tired and exhausted. His body hurt and ached. He could feel his muscles groaning due to the accumulated stress and strain from battle. He could see the fighting going on and he tried to see where his opponent was. Victarion was approaching him. He saw the Valyrian steel blade of the knight he had slain a few minutes back fallen on the ground. He needed a longsword. He parried Victarion's slash with his short sword as he rolled away from and toward the sword. He picked it up. Warmth developed his fingers. Warmth that was so strange, yet so familiar. It was a sensation he had not felt in his lifetime as a Harlan Stark. He picked up the sword and titled it in his arms as he blocked a blow from Victarion Greyjoy. He remembered as Harry Potter his first time as he picked a wand and it had chosen him. The feeling of magic. Harry could feel that his magic was responding to the sword he held in his hand. He began to be energized as his magic added to his vitality. He began to block and parry the attacks. As he kept fighting, his thrust and strikes became stronger. The sword was lighter, so it caused him a little discomfort in timing his blows initially. As he grew more confident, he started to make more counterattacks and started to put Victarion on the defensive. Sensing an opening, Harry slashed diagonally from the left toward Victarion, who threw up his shield to absorb the blow. The Valyrian steel, infused with magic, cut through the shield like butter. Victarion took out his other axe to start a dual-handed assault. Victarion was very strong and he would have overwhelmed Harry. Harry, who was tired and fatigued from the entire day's fight. However, with Harry getting back much of his strength and stamina as magic sustained him, Victarion did not stand much of a chance. Harry parried his blows with the long sword as he slashed hard at Victarion's hand. The blow connected as Victarion yelled out in pain. Harry, not leaving the opportunity, crouched and lunged as he thrusted both his swords into his opponent's thighs before kicking him hard in the chest. Victarion was thrown on his back as Harry approached him. Injured and trying to get up hastily, Victarion only managed to get to a kneeling position and raise one of his axes in front of him as defense as Harry's right arm, armed with the Valyrian sword, descended on him. The sword cut through the wooden shaft of the axe as Victarion felt the sword slash half his face. He screamed in pain before reeling from the shock of the blow. Harry noticed as he kicked Victarion in the chest as many of the Ironborn around him had begun to retreat with fear in their eyes. He picked up Victarion by his tentacled helm as he made him face the Ironborn, towards Pyke. He thrusted the Valyrian sword into his back as it came out from the middle of Greyjoy's chest. Some of the Ironborn started to run towards Pyke as he then removed the Kraken helm of the Reaver Lord. The helm had been badly damaged when Harry had struck his blow. His left eye was badly damaged and bloody, and there was a missing chunk in the lower part of his face where the sword had cleaved him. His mouth was dripping with blood as the wound from his chest kept bleeding. Harry pulled out the sword with a heave as Victarion knelt there, senseless. Many of the Ironborn had begun to retreat, which led to many of them being killed as they were attacked mercilessly by the army of the Iron Throne. It seemed that almost every eye was on Harry as he grabbed Victarion's head by the hair as he raised the Valyrian steel sword, Nightfall in his other arm. With a swift move, he separated Victarion's head from his shoulders as he held up the head of the dead Greyjoy as he shouted, "For the North and for Westeros." Men around him roared as they began to slaughter the rest of the Ironborn. Lannisport was burned to the ground that day.
Lannisport 289 actini, natspeo bebasha.
The army of the Iron Throne pushed back the Ironborn resistance throughout the day. As the day wore on, the fighting became brutal. Casualties had occurred on both sides, with quite a lot of Ironborn slaughtered ASD compared to the combined armies of the Lords of Westeros. Ned parried a blow and slew an oncoming opponent by impaling him with his greatsword ice. He saw to his left, his friend and his king, Robert fighting with the rage of a berserker as he tore into the Ironborn opposition with ferocity. Ned saw as Robert caved in the chest of Lord Blacktide as the men led by the Reaver Lord were routed. A little ahead in the right was Harry and his band of wolves fighting against the Ironborn. Harry was fighting with his two swords twirling and slashing, but his movements were slightly slowed, mostly due to exhaustion. Harry effortlessly dispatched 5 Ironborn before Ned saw as Harry went in to challenge Ser Harris Harlaw. The Ironborn knight wielded the Valyrian steel sword Nightfall, and the dark blade glimmered in the setting sun as he and Harry parried and traded blows. Harry couldn't seem to land a decisive hit on the Reaver Knight as they kept fighting for some time. Ned saw Harry move in a fluid motion as he hammered onto the shield of his opponent, staggering the knight. Not wasting time, he went for a decisive strike which the knight went to hastily block. Ned's eyes widened slightly as he saw Harry's left arm thrusting the word right into the neck region where the knight was not protected. He swept around and severed the head of the knight who the Valyrian steel sword dropped from his lifeless hands. Ned wanted to shout to Harry, but his voice would get lost in the midst of the battle, but he tried anyway. He saw with dread and horror filling him as he saw his son being attacked by Victarion Greyjoy. Victarion Greyjoy was a beast of a man who was a fearsome warrior with a reputation. He was a shrewd man and was not above adapting cheap tactics to get an upper hand in battle. He saw the Reaver Lord scour Harry as Harry finished his opponent. Sensing an opportunity, he threw dust and sand into Harry's face, blinding him momentarily. He thrust a spear right into his son's chest. Thankfully, the steel plate had helped and Victarion was not able to impale his son with his spear. Ned moved to save his son as he slew Ironborn with ferocity, all the scum who were in his way. But he need not have worried. Ned saw as Harry turned the tables on the veteran Greyjoy. He saw Harry rally the men around him, raising the head of the decapitated Greyjoy. As Ned approached Harry, he saw his son, panting from exhaustion. "Are you hurt?" Ned asked, to which Harry grimaced a little. "Nothing major or permanent, but I am knackered," Harry admitted. Ironborn around them were routed by the royal army as the last of the Ironborn escaped into Pyke. Pyke was connected by the Lordsport by a narrow corridor. Having lost Lordsport, Balon Greyjoy had decided to make the stand from Pyke, where the greater numbers of the Iron Throne could not push its massive advantage due to the narrow corridor. The battle in Lordsport was over. The injured were being attended to across the town as more Cyreg weapons were set up to breach the walls of the castle. Maesters and their apprentices could be seen across the town, tending to the wounded. Ned had taken Harry to a maester who had provided a salve for the bruise on his chest. Ned was concerned over Harry and thought the boy was hiding his injuries. But to his surprise, Harry was upbeat and energetic the very next day, spending quite some time at the practice yard practicing with his newly acquired Valyrian steel sword, Nightfall. Robert had given his blessing to keep the sword, and more so, he was genuinely impressed by the martial skills of a boy barely of 10 and 4 name days. Ned had expected that Harry would be a little overwhelmed by war, despite him going on in the north and clearing out bandits from the roads. War was cruel and harsh and often would require taking difficult decisions. Ned was a little worried with the lack of nervousness which Harry displayed, which made Ned wonder if Harry was ready for this. Ned need not have worried. Harry was skilled in combat and was a good commander. He could fight with ferocity and rally his men. Harry also deployed complex military tactics effectively, which resulted in minor casualties from his end while inflicting maximum damage on the opponents. As he exited his tent, he saw his son talking to the Lord Paramount of the Westerlands, Lord Tywin Lannister. As he approached them, he could hear the Lannister lord say, "I must say that I have not heard of such a venture being implemented on such a large scale so quickly. The winter wolves are quite fearsome in battle." Harry smiled as he thanked Tywin as he said, "You are too generous, my lord. I would say the idea of patrols and troops did come as an inspiration from the standing army that the Westerlands have." Tywin looked startled before his eyes showed the pleasure in the compliment. He saw Ned approaching and said, "Lord Stark, I was looking for you. The king has demanded your presence in his tent. We are all to be there at the earliest." Ned nodded as the Stark household guards with a few wolves and Harry accompanied Lord Tywin and the Lannister entourage to the king's tent. They entered the tent and saw Jon Arryn, the hand of the king and his old friend and mentor standing next to the king, who sat on his makeshift throne. Lord Mace Tyrell, Lord Randall Tarley, Ser Brynden the Blackfish and several other prominent lords were there.
Ned!
Harry, he boomed. Well fought. Robert grinned as he looked at Harry. Ah yes, lad, saw you fight as I was bursting open squids, he grinned. You have killed Harris Harlaw and Victarion Greyjoy in single combat. It is quite unbelievable. Makes me think of the old times. Robert continued on. Indeed, chimed in Lord Mace Tyrell. I must say, Lord Eddard, your son is a valiant warrior. I have heard many tales of the Black Wolf. For one to be so young and yet so valiant, your heir must surely make you proud. The room stilled at the slip up of the Reach Lord as Ned's eyes narrowed slightly. He saw Robert also stilling and looking thunderous. Before anyone could say anything, Harry seamlessly cut in and said, Why, I thank you, my lord. You are most generous in your words. I see why they call Highgarden the seat of chivalry. Your words do me great honor. He looked a little abashed as he continued on. I believe since we are twins, this might cause some confusion. However, Robb is elder to me and as such would be my father's heir. He finished pleasantly. Mace blustered as he hastily made an apology to the Starks. No need for apologies, my lord, Harry said amiably. I am sure you must be very busy with the many affairs of the Reach. I am honored that you have taken the time to speak to me. The Reach Lord looked very pleased as he apologized once again to Ned, who nodded his head and smiled briefly. Ned saw the various lords sniggering behind their hands at the antics of the Reach Lord. Stannis Baratheon had crushed the rebellion forces at Great Wyke and subdued the castles and taken the lords hostage as he garrisoned the castles with his men. He finished providing the complete report to Robert, who was listening to the reports, half-bored. Ser Barristan Selmy had slain Norn Goodbrother and subdued the forces in Old Wyke. Harlaw had parleyed for peace and had peacefully surrendered. Lord Roderick Harlaw had not participated in the doomed rebellion, choosing to save the lives of his bannermen. The last resistance remained at Pyke, which was to be breached soon. Another discussion came up, which was the situation of the thralls of the Ironborn. The Ironborn did not so, but they made thralls do their menial work for them. Builder, farmers, traders, masons, and even certain administrators were thralls. There were more than 15,000 thralls in the islands, who were recovered. The women thralls served a more horrible fate as they were repeatedly taken against their will. While most lords made commiserating noises, none of them actually cared about what happened to a few thousand small folk. So when Harry had suggested the crown hand over the responsibility of the relocation and settlement of the thralls to the north, everyone readily agreed, eager to wash their hands over the problem. They also got the news that the Ironborn raiders who had attacked at Seaguard had been routed and Jason Mallister had slain Prince Roderick Greyjoy, Balon's heir. Robert ended the meeting with the plans of breaching Pyke from dawn the next day. As they retired to their tents, Ned wanted the war to quickly end. He wanted to go back home to his family.
Stun xora 289 actini, Jons P.O. baixa.
With the news of the defeat of the Iron Fleet at the hands of the Royal and Redwyne fleets, it was evident that the power of the Ironborn was broken. With the full might of Westeros assaulting the Iron Islands and sieging their castles, the Reaver Lords could not reinforce their initial raids with larger numbers. The wolves had slowly surrounded the Ironborn under the command of the Reaver Lord Dunstan Drum. An old man but a fierce warrior, Lord Drum wielded the Valyrian steel sword Red Rain. The wolves had initiated guerrilla tactics to harass the Ironborn as they refused to let the main host scatter. They had surrounded them and had forced them into a settlement. They let the Ironborn let their guard down as they feasted, and they, taking an opportune moment, burnt the food stocks and the granaries, forcing the Ironborn to forage and hunt, often having to travel to forests where the wolves picked them off one by one. They had planned to frustrate the Ironborn into making a rash decision as they slowly gathered their strength. Patrols who were stationed nearby were all summoned, and soon a force of 1,000 winter wolves surrounded the Ironborn. Finn had explained to Jon that, without food or water, the Ironborn would soon be eager to vacate the settlement. Weak and desperate, they would not be able to fight as hard. and with superior tactics, Finn was sure that they would win easily. Jon hoped that Finn was right. Eventually, Finn's words came true. After a few weeks of harassing the Ironborn and dwindling almost a fifth of their numbers, the Ironborn were ready to leave the settlement and back to their ships. The Winter Wolves had gathered 600 in number a couple of hundred yards away from the front entrance of the village. 200 were mounted on horseback with their bows out, 100 of them on each side of the main host of 400 men who were on foot. The Ironborn were approaching the northern host cautiously with their tower shields up and grouped together closely, in an event if they fired arrows on them. A large war horn startled the Ironborn as they expected the host cavalry to charge, but the army in front of them did not make a move. Lord Drum was confused by the war horn, which was traditionally used for cavalry charges. Yet the mounted cavalry in front of them was not charging at them. He suddenly looked nervous as he realized that the war horn was sounded by another cavalry force which was not in front of them. Believing that his 900 men stood a better chance before the northern forces got reinforcements, they would lose men, but they would be able to get back to their ships. The Ironborn started to move forward to engage the northern host. The war horn was sounded for a second time as the two cavalry divisions went in charge at the flanks. The horsemen on the vanguard of each charge carried spears and lances as they charged towards the Ironborn. The rest of the cavalry rained arrows on the Ironborn. Not many were wounded as most of them covered themselves with the shields. The vanguards, instead of smashing into the flanks, veered away, close enough for the Ironborn to throw axes at them, but not near enough that they could make a decisive hit. The cavalry surrounded the Ironborn, circling theme and raining arrows on them, intent on breaking their formation. The Ironborn, seeing an opportunity, started hurling axes at the mounted archers who were attempting to engage the rear flank of the Ironborn. The Winter Wolves used formidable evasion tactics as they rained arrows on the Ironborn. However, they were lesser in number and could not overwhelm the rear flank, and a few horsemen fell as axes felled their horses or them, and the disoriented wolves would be slaughtered by the horsemen eventually started to retreat, going further away and trying to entice the Ironborn into breaking formation. But the Ironborn were also desperate and persistent at not letting the cavalry archers overwhelm them. So engrossed were most of the soldiers in fending off the horsemen that most did not see hundreds of arrows sailing right into their disorganized ranks, and many could not raise up their shield in time as the arrows skewered them. The 400 wolves along with Jon marched towards the enemy host. They kept firing volleys of arrows into the Ironborn as they approached them. He was moving in the standard formation of the wolves, which as Finn told him that Harry had developed. The 400 men marched in formations of 10 rows and 40 columns. Each man stood apart in each row with enough space for another man to fight. The first row consisted of men equipped with shields, long swords, and throwing javelins, who used them to engage with the enemy in close combat. The second row, which consisted of spearmen, also had shields and javelins, and they stood at alternate positions with respect to the first row, such that if the second line moved forward, it would seamlessly merge with the first line. The third and fourth line again had swordsmen and spearmen to reinforce the initial infantry forces who were engaging the enemy. The last 6 lines consisted entirely of archers who were equipped with weirwood bows. They would pick off the rear guard of forces while the infantry engaged. Using the benefit of the formation, they could even shoot arrows at closer range targets, as the first 4 lines of infantry would continuously move around in formations, causing openings in the ranks of the enemies which the archers would use to rain death on the enemies. As the infantry engaged the Ironborn, fierce fighting broke out in the ranks. The archers, taking advantage of the positions, would take out any Ironborn who were not shielded or had been wounded and fallen, quickly dispatching them. Jon parried an attack as he ducked around the Ironborn Reaver before using his bastard longsword to slash across his torso, tearing open his armor and flesh as the Ironborn screamed. He quickly finished him off by a hard slice across his face, cleaving the Reaver face open in half. Jon and the Winter Wolves around him engaged the Ironborn with discipline and tenacity. They were slaughtering through the ranks fairly easily, as they had managed to mentally fatigue the majority of the forces. As he ducked around another clumsy swipe from an Ironborn as he stabbed him in the chest, killing the Ironborn instantly, Jon heard the sound of a cavalry charge. Parrying a few blows as he decapitated the next opponent, He saw the cavalry smash hard onto the flanks of the Ironborn. As more chaos spread across the Ironborn ranks with the cavalry charge, Jon managed to work his way into facing the Reaver Lord himself. Lord Dunstan Drum was desperate as he saw a young boy challenge him. Roaring at the audacity of a greenbowie, he charged at him with ferocity. Jon carefully parried the blows as the Reaver Lord rained them upon him. Jon sidestepped the blows as he forced his attack on the Reaver Lord, forcing him on the defensive. As Jon kept fighting Lord Drum, he realized that the Lord, due to his old age, probably was not as quick to parry blows that came below his waist. Jon started to increase the power of his blows as he started to make heavy overhead and horizontal strikes, aiming strikes on the older man's head and torso. The wolves around him were slaughtering the Ironborn. Some of the Ironborn tried to flee only for the archers and the cavalry to rain death on them. Lord Drum overextended and Jon understood that the old man was tiring. Sidestepping, Jon rammed his elbow hard into the face of the man, disbalancing him. Taking the opportunity, he lunged forward and aimed for the torso again as the old Reaver Lord tried to hastily bring up his sword to parry. Jon aimed for the legs, feinting and dipping his blade at the last moment as they slashed at the legs of Lord Drum. The man yelled in pain as he fell. Jon had already made a strike and made a slash towards his opponent's sword arm as made contact and disarmed Lord Drum. Jon thrust his blade right into the old man's heart, killing him instantly. Panting at the effort, Jon picked up the sword Red Rain and marveled at it. As sound rushed back into Jon's ears, he looked around and saw that the wolves had managed to box in the Ironborn and now were slaughtering them. Jon heard another horn as another cavalry charge was sounded. The force of 300 cavalry who were attacking from the rear had managed to overwhelm the rear guard of the Ironborn as more than 200 cavalry charged and smashed into the rear flank of the Ironborn. Within a few minutes, dozens of Ironborn were slaughtered mercilessly. The Ironborn were prideful people, but they also had a sense of self-preservation. Seeing their liege lord fall in battle, as they were outmatched, outmaneuvered and overwhelmed by the winter wolves, many of the Ironborn threw down their arms. Those who chose not to did not live to see the next day. Siege of Pyke, 289 AC. Harry's POV. At the start of dawn, as promised by King Robert, the trebuchets and catapults were lined up and fired. A particular region of the southern wall, which also had a watchtower, was targeted. The burning balls of fire and stone were hurled at walls as the day progressed. Barrels of oil were also thrown at the walls so that they caught fire easily. By afternoon, they had the walls down as Thuras of Myr entered through the breach with his flaming longsword, closely followed by Jorah Mormont. The Ironborn were severely outnumbered by now. With continued losses after the burning of the Lannisport fleet, thousands of Ironborn had been slaughtered by now. Yet the day trudged in slowly as the Ironborn refused to give an inch. They fought across the castle courtyard as Harry dodged and parried a blow before thrusting his short sword into the man's lungs. Harry was still getting used to the lightness of the Valyrian steel. His magic felt connected with the sword. As he had practiced earlier, he had begun to realize that the sword could actually move incredibly fast and often reacted to Harry's subconscious of protecting him. As a result, if he overextended or lay at risk of getting hurt, his magic would flare up and sort of nudge him and the sword to block, parry on strike in a certain direction. As he dispatched another opponent, he realized he needed to work more on this ability. The day wore on as the royal army breached the castle. There was fierce fighting in the corridors as the last few Ironborn who had not surrendered or been killed tried to embark a futile resistance. As the resistance in the castle was slaughtered to the last man, they breached the throne room of the castle. As King Robert entered the room with the Kingsguard, Ned, Harry, and some of the major lords, an Ironborn rushed towards them, rushing towards the king to make a desperate attempt to land a fatal blow. Harry intercepted the man's path and lazily threw a dagger at him. The dagger struck the man in his legs as he fell crashing onto the ground. With nightfall unsheathed, he casually walked up to the scrambling Ironborn as he slashed at his throat, leaving the man bleeding on the floor to death. King Robert continued to walk towards the King of the Salt Throne as he removed his helm. Towering over the Greyjoy, his clear voice carried across the hall. "You have some nerve challenging the Iron Throne. I should execute you right here for treason." We bowed to the dragons. "You are not a dragon." Balon Greyjoy said, I am not a dragon, but I have smashed the dragons. I killed the last dragon at the Trident. Do you know who I am? I am the demon of the Trident. Kneel before me now and I may consider sparing you," growled Robert. Balon, sensing the hostility from the rest of the lords of Westeros, knelt and renewed his oath as the Lord of the Iron Islands. Many of the Reach lords as well as Stannis wanted Robert to end the Greyjoy line. Jon Arryn was a vocal opposer of further violence or bloodshed. His father Ned Stark looked to be in deep thought. Finally, Robert decided to make the decision by taking inputs from Jon and his father as he asked the rest of the lords to wait at the courtyard. After a while, King Robert, Jon Arryn, Eddard Stark and Balon Greyjoy walked into the courtyard. King Robert looked across the courtyard, which held all the officers and lords of the army of the Iron Throne. After a lot of deliberation, I have decided that Balon Greyjoy and the Greyjoy line shall not meet its end today. I do agree with what my hand Jon says, as we must be very careful before exterminating a great house of Westeros. Robert said in a clear voice, I name you, Lord Balon Greyjoy, the Lord of the Iron Islands. Balon Greyjoy knelt and repeated his oaths to Robert. Robert carried on. We also have to value the valor with which our men fought. Many men have been worthy, and as such on this day as I declare the end of the Greyjoy rebellion, I will knight those who I deem worthy. Harry saw as various lords and warriors of the Reach, the Stormlands, the Westerlands were knighted. Even Jorah Mormont was given a knighthood, which caused a lot of cheer among the northern people. Even though the Northerners did not traditionally believe in the concept of knights, they could always understand the celebration of valor. Harry came and knelt in front of the king, unsure of what he would do with the knighthood, and he was devoted to the old gods. He was thinking of a way to refute the knighthood when Robert said, Ned has told me how you are devoted to the old gods. As long as I am king, I shall be the defender of all faiths. He continued, however, your deeds need to be recognized, and let it not be said that Robert Baratheon is measly when it comes to sharing glory. With the fierceness with which you have fought the Ironborn, with the swordsmanship skills with which you slew the Kraken Lord, I, Robert Baratheon, first of his name, King of the Undulls, and the first men name you as the Sword of the North. The Sword of the North. Mutters went around repeating the phrase as they tried speaking it out loud. The Northmen slowly started to cheer as they all started to chant the Sword of the North. Harry stood up and bowed to the king and went and stood next to his father, who looked immensely proud of him. The chantings stopped after some time after Harry had waved at the men. Robert waited for the cheers to die down as he then said, also, as assurance, Lord Greyjoy has agreed to let his son and heir Theon Greyjoy to be a ward of the Lord of Winterfell. Lord Eddard has graciously agreed to this arrangement, and with this I believe we can call this to an end. Harry's eyes narrowed at Robert's words. The second son of Balon had died when a tower fell on him during the siege. Theon Greyjoy was a 13-year-old boy who looked scared of the people around him. Harry wondered if the Greyjoy would be able to adjust in Winterfell. He had told his father about reservations, seeing that he had killed the boy's uncle. His father had reassured him that everything will be fine and Eddard would be responsible for Theon. Seeing that his father would not be budged on the matter, he had let it go. He had an inclination as to what his father was trying to achieve. By raising him as his own ward, his father intended to grow an innate sense of honor within the boy, so that when the time came, the Lord of the Iron Islands and the Lord of Winterfell could be allies in time. Harry couldn't tell why, but he felt that this was an exercise in futility. He understood taking the boy as a hostage, but somehow Harry didn't believe his father would end up achieving what he said. But he shrugged and decided to trust his father's judgment on this. The war was over and he would finally be able to go home. He missed his family. He wanted to see them.
Winterfell, Natspeo Bebasha, 291 actini.
Eddard Stark, Lord Paramount of the North, was in a quandary. As he sat in his solar, he could not quite believe the reports he was reading. The trade routes which Harlan had devised, that he himself thought of as something beneficial, turned out to be incredibly lucrative. Trade had multiplied by almost 10 times and the North was prospering with the influx in trade. The trade routes were some of the safest roads he had ever seen. There were outposts every 5 miles, and there were watering holes and camping areas every 10 miles apart. There were regular patrols along the trader quotes as well to ensure that the traders were not ambushed or attacked. Trade caravans also had the option to hire a unit of winter wolves, for those who were able to afford the price. With almost guaranteed safety in the north, many people flocked there to make opportunities for trade and scope. Ned knew that many small folk had flocked to the north in recent years. This worried Ned, as while the summers had been pleasant and kind, an equally harsh winter was coming for sure, and many of these people would die as they would be hardly accustomed with the weather. He had voiced his concerns to Harlan, and the boy, to his surprise, already had an answer. Harry had by now established mutually beneficial trade relationships with Bravos and had started to import large quantities of food and various other tools and such. Harry told Ned that he was aiming to solve the scarcity of food and shelter, as he believed that if the small folk were reasonably well off, it would be beneficial to the lords in the long run. The other lords and vassals had agreed to cooperate, more so as it was Winterfell who was bearing the cost of operations. In less than a year, the trade routes had provided great profit to many of the lords, and with Harry had commissioned carriages which could be rented by traders. Inns which had been established along the trade routes needed people to keep them functional. By essentially creating more opportunities for the small folk, he was providing them with a fair bit of coin, which in turn increased the lord's revenue across the north. After the Ironborn rebellion, Harry had become more thoughtful and sometimes rather melancholy. His skills with the sword was unmatched, and Ned had to admit that perhaps Harry was probably one of the best swordsmen in Westeros. Tales of his bravery and his exploits were bandied about in inns and taverns. Harry's skills in administration, politics, and rule of law was something that was quite revered in the north. The sword in the north had lived up to his name and was doing everything he could to better the lives of his fellow Northmen. The reverence with which many of the north had begun to treat Harry with used to make Ned a little uncomfortable, as it used to remind him of Rhaegar Targaryen. Ned chastised himself. Harry was no Rhaegar. He was not a madman who only had a veneer of charm. He did not have insane ideas of prophecies, and he did not do things which were meaningless and caused chaos. But the reactions from the small folk were so similar. Only that he had rarely seen such devotion from Northmen. The people were loyal and honest and tough, but the way girls swooned, the men exchanged looks of awe and envy, mothers having their babes blessed, the Northmen were never quite so devoted and in awe of any young lord. This did pose a minor problem, but Ned didn't believe that Harry would begrudge his brother Robb of the lordship of Winterfell, as that was his birthright. But Ned did want to provide some autonomy, as he believed that the boy would do well on his own. Moat Cailin was a ruin, but many of the Ironborn prisoners had relocated there, and Harry used to occasionally make the trip to Moat Cailin and also visit the marshlands. Maybe he would assign the renovation to Harry, as he would certainly do a splendid job. With his mind made up, he decided to make the required authorizations as he informed Maester Luwin to call on Harry. Robb had also grown up to be a splendid young man. His appearance favored his Tully side. He had grown up to be an able administrator. He had also grown up to be sturdy and could hold his own with a sword. However, Robb used to dislike fighting. Harry had John used to be out on patrols and other errands that Harry had to run, while Robb stayed back and administered his duties from Winterfell. Theon Greyjoy, the ward of Lord Balon Greyjoy, followed around Robb, as he was terrified of Harry. Harry had also maintained a distance from the boy, either distrusting him or trying not to antagonize the boy, as he had killed several members of the boy's house. Over time, Robb and Theon had grown to be good friends. With Harry and John constantly on the road, Ned was happy that Robb also had someone close to his age for company. As Harry entered the solar and greeted him, he motioned for him to sit. As Harry sat, Ned saw Harry's eyes, filled with curiosity. He stated seriously, "The developments that have been occurring in the north have been quite splendid. Most of the lords are incredibly pleased. Your actions have resulted in great benefit to all. Your outstanding understanding of administration gives me hope that you will be up for this task." Harry looked pleased at the praise and asked, "What would be the task?" Ned looked at Harry, and he believed this was the right choice. "I want you to restore Moat Cailin." King's Landing, meeting of the Small Council, Stannis POV 292 AC. The meetings of the Small Council were held almost always with the absence of the king. Counting coppers is what Robert called them. Stannis watched with a severe look as the Grand Maester Pycelle droned on about the vagaries and politics of the citadel. Stannis had no love for the decrepit old fool, as Stannis would have ensured such treacherous fools not surround him had he been king. During Robert's rebellion, it was Pycelle who had convinced the Mad King to open the doors of King's Landing to the Lannisters, who in turn sacked the city and committed disgusting atrocities in the name of bringing justice. The acts of those days permanently created an impasse with Dorne, as Robert had accepted the atrocities, albeit in a resigned manner, that had led to an almost permanent rift between Robert and Lord Eddard Stark, who had been renowned to be a man of honor. The fallout had been legendary, and had Lyanna not died in the course of the rebellion, perhaps the tempers would have stayed for a longer time. Perhaps it would have been for the betterment of the realm. Or perhaps not. Lord Varys, the Master of Whisperers, brought out an interesting bit of news from the north. Lord Varys, the Master of Whispers of the Small Council, was a strange man. Garbed in the most intricate of silks and the most used perfumed oils and scents, the man was an enigma. Procured from Lys by the Mad King, this man was probably one of the most dangerous men in Westeros, as his trade was in whispers. Knew how, but the man indeed possessed the most intricate network of spies that could ever be created. He adjusted his silks before speaking out. "My lords, the birds from the north bring an interesting turn of affairs," he began in a soft voice. "Lord Eddard Stark has sent his son, Harlan Stark, to Moat Cailin. It appears that the Sword of the North will be permanently settling down at the moat, and will in fact renovations have already begun for some time, is what I get to hear." This certainly was news. This would be the first in many years that a lord of Moat Cailin would be settling there permanently. The legendary battle between the Undulls and the First Men, where the invasion of the Undulls could not get past Moat Cailin. For such a strategic position to be taken up by the Starks again, given that the fort was in a state of ruin for many years, was indeed a surprise. Jon Arryn, the Hand of the King, spoke up. "That is indeed big news. I will be writing to Eddard to have a better understanding of this." "Were you able to find out the intentions of the young Stark?" Jon asked. Lord Varys simpered. "Actually, my lord, Lord Harlan has been very vocal about his reasons. It is common knowledge that he is trying to improve the trade and conditions of the people in the north. He certainly has an affinity for enterprises, I must say. Few we have seen who can accomplish such aspirations in such a detailed manner." Lord Varys was not wrong. Lord Harlan Stark was perhaps one of the most gifted individuals Stannis had come across. His plans and his strategies for trade had gradually increased the income and the trade of the Northmen. The Winter Wolves, with their famous exploits, had soon become the most reliable group of individuals who could provide safe passage during travels and expeditions made by merchants. They had expanded to even Essos and the Free Cities, and the trade of the North had increased several-fold over the last few years. The discovery of coal and silver in the northern mountains was considered as a blessing of the old gods. While it was also a majorly known fact that Harlan Stark was a devout follower of the old gods, Stannis did wonder if he was touched by the gods themselves. He was a man of duty and would not put much stock in such tales, but the young lord's participation in saving his daughter from a life of the horrors of grayscale did make Stannis wonder at times. Stannis was broken out of his thoughts as Varys spoke up. "We also have some news from the Far East. The Targaryens are now in Essos and are perpetually in debt, mostly due to the excesses of the beggar prince." The Master of Coin spoke up. "We also have the commemorations for the name day of the young Prince Joffrey." Jon Arryn had a resigned look on his face. "Very well then," he stated as the small council went back to discussing the intricacies of holding the name day ceremony. "Counting coppers indeed," complained Renly, who was the Master of Laws after they had deliberated some time on the expenses. Robert's excesses had always kept the treasury nearly empty, which had in turn made the Iron Throne huge debts with the Iron Bank and the Lannisters. Tywin Lannister, who literally ran the Seven Kingdoms as the hand of the King of Aerys Targaryen, the Mad King, was noticeably absent from the capital city. Various positions were being provided to people loyal to the Lannisters, but the Old Lion never came to King's Landing beyond a few days' stretch at a time. Since the sacking of King's Landing, the Lannisters had over time created a presence in the capital, mostly due to the influences possessed by the Lannisters over Robert, as they had plenty of gold. Tywin had brokered an alliance by marriage, and his daughter, Cersei Lannister, became the Queen of the Seven Kingdoms. Stannis knew they were allies and he knew his duty. But he always had a distaste for Lannisters, because much like how it happened during the rebellion, while Stannis held out Storm's End eating horses, dogs and rats to survive, the Lannisters entered the fray after the Battle of the Trident where the Loyalist forces had been badly massacred and routed, when victory had all been but assured. Stannis was allied with the Lannisters, but he did not trust them. The meeting soon ended and the members of the small council dispersed. Stannis was approached by Renly and Jon Arryn, who wanted to check upon the health of his daughter. Her recovery from grayscale was indeed fortunate, and the maesters were still perplexed as to how she was able to make a full recovery. Jon spoke as he approached Stannis. "How is Lady Selene and Shireen?" he inquired. "They are well. The maesters are still monitoring her health. There does not seem to be any infection left," Stannis said. He did not choose to speak more on the subject, and they proceeded to talk about other small affairs before dispersing. Stannis was leaving for Dragonstone soon. While he did not show it, almost losing his only daughter had shaken the man. He wanted to spend some time with her now. Highgarden, 292 AC, Marjorie's POV. In the High Castle of Highgarden, the ancient seat of the Tyrells, the regional capital of the Reach, Margaery was feeling utterly bored. She did not fault her handmaidens, as most were excited to hear the exploits of a young lord. But heroic deeds and such were so dull and boring. Such heroes tended to be air-headed and filled with self-grandiose and pompousness, all with the subtlety of a raging bull. Such people were easily manipulated, as she was told by her grandmother Lady Olenna Tyrell. Lady Olenna Tyrell, her grandmother, was probably one of the most cunning people in Westeros. When Margaery had found out that Lady Olenna was swindling merchants by giving them lighter gold dragons, she was delighted by the cunning displayed by the old woman. While her father Lord Mace Tyrell was the Lord of Highgarden, it was a well-known fact that most decisions were made by Lady Olenna. She was a ruthless pragmatist and had used to constantly berate her son for many of the decisions he took. She was brought out of her musings when one of her handmaidens, Eleanor, asked her, giggling, "So what do you think of the Black Wolf?" Margaery paused for a moment before answering. "By all accounts, he seems to be a remarkable warrior. He established the Order of the Winter Wolves, participated in the Greyjoy Rebellion in the Royal Army. He defeated and killed Harys Harlaw and Victarion Greyjoy, and they were older, bigger, and more experienced men than him. King Robert titled him as the Sword of the North. All this indicates that he is at the very least a very adept warrior and can possibly be a strong military leader." Eleanor smiled. "I can sense a but coming." Margaery laughed. "It's only because you know me too well. You are right, of course. He is no doubt a very strong and capable warrior, but mere display of strength is not enough to defeat or circumvent every obstacle you would face. King Robert, he is such a strong military leader that I believe his strength surpasses almost none at this point, even more so during the rebellion. But he was defeated by my father's bannerman Randall Tarley." Margaery smiled as she saw her handmaidens contemplating her words. To drive the point further home, she stated, "So it does not matter how valiant a warrior may be. If a lord is only good at brandishing his sword in battle, such a lord is a foolish one." "Quite right." Margaery heard the voice of her grandmother, Olenna Tyrell, as she walked in with Margaery's mother Allery Tyrell. "However, with the recent developments in the north, there is something more to that boy than just swinging swords," Olenna said. With a polite nod, Eleanor and the other handmaidens left Margaery as she looked inquisitively at her grandmother. They kept it quiet, but the economy there has boosted considerably. It has grown more than 10 times what it was 5 years ago. That is a tremendous achievement. With the Winter Wolves essentially starting a protection detail all across Westeros and the better roads that were built connecting the trading cities in the north, the merchants have had an easier time going there. Since the north is mostly barren, it fetches us quite the good price. We had been steadily increasing the prices over the course of years. It was going very smoothly for us, until the north started to extensively trade with Bravos and other free cities. I heard that the young lord is also trying to implement agriculture in the north. While that might be ultimately foolish, But what is of concern is that we no longer have the advantage with the North in trading. Marjorie listened to her grandmother and she was impressed. Apparently this young lord was responsible for so tactfully nullifying their upper hand. This was interesting. What does the North have to trade for? She asked. They are primarily using their natural resources. Their primary exports are various woodcrafts and, of course, the protection detail of the winter wolves. I hear there have been many expeditions to the Free Cities, and practically many lords of the Riverlands and King's Landing and Stormlands have taken to make use of their protection detail. They are easier to afford and are far more honorable than a damn mercenary. Olenna stated. Marjorie was astonished. To be sure, she asked her grandmother, "Grandmother, you suspect that Harlan Stark is solely responsible for all this?" Olenna nodded her head. As they proceeded to then move towards the hall, to join her father for lunch, Marjorie's mind was on all that she had heard from her grandmother. Marjorie had always been pragmatic and she was ambitious. Under the keen and sharp eye of her grandmother, she had learnt how to be deceptively sweet and charming and get her way. The way these young lords would fight and squabble for her attention was quite pathetic. She did admit she felt pleasure manipulating such fools, but it wasn't that she was impressed by any of them. None of them could be a partner for her. Olenna had told her that it did not matter, that an heir and a pliable husband would be a good enough trade-off, but Marjorie didn't want to believe in it. Harlan Stark seemed to be a very interesting individual. Marjorie was intrigued to know more, to understand what the young lord had in mind. Maybe she would get to meet him soon.
Moat Cailin, 293 actini, Harris POV baixa.
Harry was intently looking at the plans for reconstructing the dilapidated castle. He had arrived at Moat Cailin for over 2 years now. The once strong and ancient stronghold of 20 towers and enormous walls had been reduced to a pittance by the ravages of time. There used to be a wooden keep as well, which had rotted away, and only 3 towers amongst the original 20 stood today. Harry had taken up residence in the Gatehouse Tower, the largest of the remaining towers. The thralls who were rescued from the Iron Islands had been settling around the castle. Harry, who wanted to provide a place for the rescued thralls, had ordered the construction of a large village to accommodate them. Since most thralls had hard, laborious tasks provided to them, they had taken to farming and tilling the fields readily. While initially cowed, scared and uncertain about what was to happen to them after the Ironborn rebellion, all of them had been immensely thankful and grateful to Harry. Harry was particularly upset about the salt wives amongst the thralls. Some of them had been clearly abused to such an extent that they seemed dead from within. While he had initiated several rehabilitation plans and ensured the safety and security of those folks, he realized not everything would be smooth sailing or easy, as several of these people had been abused for years altogether. There were several families who were thralls as well as isolated people who the Ironborn had captured. It would be better if he were to assign some responsibilities and leadership roles to a few, to ensure that these people were well cared for. Theron was one of the thralls who had more of an administrative role in the Iron Islands. While Harry had been in Winterfell, he had ensured that these people were well settled around Moat Cailin, and Theron had come forward and acted as the de facto head of all the thralls. Upon reaching Moat Cailin, Harry had come to an uncomfortable realization. Many were used to the old ways and had assumed Harry, while a kind and generous lord, would also have expectations from them. As a result, on his first night in Moat Cailin, 2 of the women had come to his chambers to offer comfort. They were clearly afraid but also had resolve in their demeanor, which led Harry to believe this was not on a whim, but the girls were sent after being told what was expected of them. Harry had provided them with a hot meal and asked his castellan to arrange rooms for the girls to sleep for the night. He had gently rebuffed their awkward advances, and the following day had summoned Theron to set his expectations clear. He had left Moat Cailin after that to meet the Mountain his return. He felt that he was able to sort the matter out quite well, as there was no repeat occurrence again. Harry had discovered that the weirwood trees had magic surrounding them some time back. Drawing in the latent magic from the trees, he was able to make lands surrounding the moat arable. He passed it off as blessing of the old gods. While using, he had created a ritual to ensure the magic suffused the land gradually. He proceeded to ask the thralls who knew farming to till and work on the land, so they could grow their own food. They had readily taken up the task at the prospect of growing their own food, and Harry had provided several food crops like rice, paddy, cranberries, sweet potatoes, and pumpkins. The magic would ensure that the crops grew well and the land did not lose its nourishment. There were small makeshift constructs which the thralls had made to stay around the broken towers. Harry had started to build concrete houses similar to the developments he had made in other villages of the north. Lord Reed, Lord Manderley had at his request sent some of their builders and stonemasons, and Harry had requested for the rest from Winterfell. Gradually over time they had managed to build quite a few houses made of stone and wood for the residents of Moat Cailin. A tavern had also been made which was large and was managed by a few retired winterwolves who chose to serve Harry even after they could not continue to go on patrolling and taking escort jobs. Harry had gladly invested money in the tavern. The atmosphere of the tavern was lively and jolly, with men and women coming for food and liquor after a hard day's work. Ale, beer, wine and food went all around, and the atmosphere was lively. Harry also used to join them many times and would often play his flute. His soulful notes were always welcome, and the folks at the tavern would be eager to listen to him play. Over time, many new people came in to settle in the area. Harry, with his extensive connections with the merchants, had turned the settlement into a town. He had also created another base for the winter wolves here, and the previously dilapidated ruin was eventually turning into a bustling settlement. His nickname of the Black Wolf had stuck around, and the folks had called the place Wolf's Den. Harry had Jon accompany him to Moat Cailin. While his father was skeptical, Harry and Jon had convinced Ned that this was the best choice for Jon. While Jon wanted to join the Winter Wolves, Harry had denied his request, instead asking him to hold off making any major decisions, and had for the time being made him his sworn shield. Jon had grown to be tall and wiry but strong. He was quite dangerous with his sword Red Rain, the sword he had taken after slaying Dunstan Drum during the Greyjoy Rebellion. He was quite deadly and could dispatch bandits and brigands while patrolling with ease. He also had developed a keen sense of scouting and learned quite a lot from the wolves, and Harry personally believed Jon would be capable of much more. Harry himself, now of age, had grown into a powerfully built man. He also, like Jon, had an athletic build than a more heavier frame. His swordsmanship had improved even more, with him incorporating his magic to help him in his fights. While his magic would signal him danger, he practiced his skills in also reading the surface thoughts of his opponents while in battle. This would result in him being devastatingly dangerous while he was patrolling, and often he could use ravens and other birds and animals to help him with scouting. He had greatly improved his trade with Essos and the Riverlands, and would also contribute to a majority of the taxes the North had to pay to the Iron Throne. The mines in the northern mountains had ensured that they would have a steady supply of minerals. While most mines did not have much gold or silver, there were many other metals that could be found which were highly useful for trade and various reasons. Overall, he had lowered their imports and had increased their exports, and had built a great economy for the North, something many were grateful for, as for the first time in many years, the Northerners did not have to be frugal and rigid due to necessity. With more and more of the small folk moving to the North for a better life, the population of the North also had increased. With his father and Rob's help, they were able to establish several new villages and towns, with some towns developing special artisan skills under Harry's patronage. Almost all of the lords were quite happy with his actions. There were a few who were still wary of House Stark and by extension him, but Harry had made the resolve to unite the North as one.
Moat Cailin, Jones POV baixa 293 actini.
Jon, after the rebellion, had taken up with the Winter Wolves. While his father Eddard was wary about sending Jon to Moat Cailin, as Harry was yet to establish the fort properly, both Jon and Harry had insisted, and Eddard had finally relented, probably thinking it might be good for Jon. After the Greyjoy Rebellion, Jon had created somewhat of a reputation for himself for slaying Lord Drum in single combat. The Valyrian longsword Red Rain, which he had acquired, was mainly the cause for that. Robb, as the acting lord, had declared that Jon would be the rightful owner, earning a scowl from his mother. Robb had insisted on it, and the Winter Wolves had also praised Jon. The small folk had also started flocking to him whenever he would head over to the town. Jon was used to seeing Harry being mobbed by the small folk, with him playing the flute and being the Sword of the North. So Jon was quite surprised at how quickly people had taken to him. He remembered being quite shocked when his father and brother returned from the war. Harry had another Valyrian steel sword with him, and he was given a title, the Sword of the North. He had immediately gone on to hug them, being relieved they were okay. He was not surprised that the king had decided to give Harry a title. Jon always thought that the title was so apt for Harry. Harry had changed the face of the North from such a young age. He was kind, he was generous, and he was so protective of his family. People in the castle and eventually in the town had stopped calling him bastard. Even Theon, who would often derive sick pleasure in calling him a bastard, had stopped calling him that. Jon could not prove it, but he was sure that Harry had done something about that. Harry was called to be blessed by the old gods. He could enchant armor, he could actually perform magic. While Jon had never seen Harry perform magic blatantly, much of what he did by carving these things he called as runes. Jon knew Harry would use blood as he had seen one of the initiations of the Winter Wolves, but felt Harry could possibly be capable of more. But Jon knew that despite all the fame and all of the accomplishments, to his family and friends, he was always just Harry. He never paid much heed to the difference between them, him being a second-born son and Jon being a bastard. Harry would train with him and would keep telling Jon how Jon eventually should join the Winter Wolves. While Jon was still thinking of joining the Night's Watch, so Harry had decided for a trip to Castle Black. After the trip, Jon had not brought up the topic of joining the Night's Watch again. Upon arriving at Moat Cailin, Jon was told that his initiation was to be done. Harry then proceeded to perform the ritual and Jon took the oath. After the ceremony ended and Jon wore the amulet, he felt an energy course through his body. Harry told him that he would need to rest and would be fine the next day. Jon had woken up the next morning feeling more agile and light. He tried to test it in the training yard. He was faster and could make more powerful blows with his sword. After a few days, Jon realized why it always seemed to him that the wolves never seemed exhausted. As Jon walked up to the tavern, he could hear the sound of the flute played by Harry. Jon would often hear Harry play this tune, and it was hauntingly beautiful. There was complete silence at the tavern as Harry played. Jon remembered Harry would tell him that he had composed the tune from a real story. As Harry finished, Jon could see a few folks with tears in their eyes. As Harry had developed Moat Cailin, slowly people had flocked to hear. Many folks would also come from the south and settle. Over time, a bustling town was created and Harry currently was building outer walls for the city he would eventually develop the town to. Slowly a tavern was built and bards also often came to ply their trade here. As Jon recalled, there already were a few songs on Harry. The Wolf and the Kraken was a great song, and often Sansa and Arya would mercilessly tease Harry as Harry would get embarrassed when anyone mentioned the song. Jon walked up to Harry and asked, "Did you get any letter from father? Haven't received ravens since this morning." Harry said, "That reminds me, I have to write to the Citadel for a maester. Would need someone to take care of things," Harry added sheepishly. Harry gestured and both left the tavern to take a walk around town. As Harry walked next to Jon, he said, "The outer wall will be built and secured within the next month. After that, I was thinking of going to Winterfell." Jon was happy to hear that. He had missed Robb, Arya, father, and the others back at Winterfell. "That's great. Do you have something in mind?" he asked Harry. Harry had a mischievous twinkle in his eye. "I have to speak to my father. We all soon will be adults, you, me, and Robb. I wanted to see more of Westeros. We should travel to most of the great houses. I don't think the Dornish would be very happy to see us," Jon said, amused at Harry's idea. "Besides, how will father allow both of you to gallivant across Westeros? He will have to take care of Winterfell while you have to take care of Moat Cailin." "You let me worry about talking to father," Harry said, smiling at Jon. "There is a good chance that King Robert might announce some big tourney soon." "A tourney? And we would take part? In what? Jousting? While I can handle a spear from a horse, it doesn't seem I would be fond of jousting," Jon pointed out. "You can always try it out," Harry said easily, as they stood near the corner of the path, watching a few children play in the streets. "Besides, there is also a melee, and that is what is interesting." "The tourney could be for just anointed knights," Jon pointed out. "Besides, won't Lady Stark call out the grave danger of Starks venturing south?" "Oh, please. Don't be so superstitious, Harry said testily. Says the guy who literally performs feats of magic. Jon deadpanned. Okay. You have a point there maybe, Harry states while deep in thought. But I can say for sure that there are no curses which afflict us Starks on this. It was pure bad luck and a very mad, mad king. Harry paused and then looked at Jon. But that won't deter me from going south. Jon gave in and finally said in a resigned manner, all right, I'll come with you. I should make sure that both of you don't end up in places you don't want to be. Great. You do that. So we leave for Winterfell in a fortnight. I will have everything finished here by then. Harry nodded. I shall see you later then, he said as he left for his solar again. Jon went back to the tavern for more ale and food. As he dug into his supper, his mind was running through all the new possibilities of the next few weeks. He was soon taken away from his thoughts by the fold in the tavern who would insist on hearing stories from his time from patrols. Small Council, 293 AC, Stannis POV. The small council chambers are dimly lit, adorned with ornate tapestries depicting sigils of noble houses. Jon Arryn, the Hand of the King, sits at the head of the table, poring over stacks of parchment. Stannis Baratheon, the stern and rigid master of ships, sits at his right, his eyes fixed on a map spread out before him. Across from Stannis, Petyr Baelish, known as Littlefinger, leans back in his chair, a sly smirk playing on his lips. Varys, the eunuch spymaster, stands near a bookshelf, observing the others with his enigmatic gaze. The members of the small council all gathered into the small council chambers. Robert was unsurprisingly absent from the gathering, as he often chose to skive off such meetings, calling them as counting coppers. As Jon started speaking about the finances of the Iron Throne, Stannis was quite surprised to see the amount of money Robert was splurging. They already owed a significant amount of gold to the Lannisters, who had graciously footed every expense of Robert. Stannis did not believe in such meaningless and frivolous spending. Wine, women, expensive items, and interests, Robert seemed to be more happy drunk than trying to rule the Seven Kingdoms. Stannis was broken out of his reverie as Jon started speaking. Jon Arryn, rubbing his temples, said, "The debts of the Iron Throne continue to weigh heavily upon us. We must find a solution to this predicament. We already owe a significant amount of gold to the Lannisters. It is prudent we solve this crisis before this poses a severe problem in the realm." Stannis gruffly responded, "The Crown's finances have been woefully mismanaged for far too long. Our fleets are in disrepair, and we lack the necessary funds to maintain them. As the master of ships, I feel this is a big problem and we will be exposed and unprepared, worse off than the Greyjoy Rebellion." At this, Lord Baelish looked uncomfortable as he spoke. "My Lord Jon, I can assure you that I will look into this and ensure we have enough to ensure the finances do not seem to be mismanaged," he added tersely. Varys, smirking subtly, could not help but chuckle and add in, "Mismanagement, indeed. It seems some people have their own priorities when it comes to the realm's coffers." Raising an eyebrow, Baelish was quite waspish with his response. "Ah, Varys, always the one to notice the subtlest of corruption. But tell me, my dear spymaster, can you even comprehend the concept of manhood?" Varys, simpering, "Ah, Lord Baelish, your concerns for my manhood are as impressive as your reputation for financial integrity." As Stannis looked to break the pointless argument, he heard the doors of the small council chambers open with a slam and in came Robert. The entire room went quiet upon seeing the king enter the small council chamber. The small council chambers remained dimly lit, with the air thick with tension. King Robert Baratheon sits heavily on his throne at the head of the table, a goblet of wine in his hand. The other council members, Jon Arryn, Stannis Baratheon, Petyr Baelish, and Varys, are gathered around, waiting for their king's command. Robert, raising his goblet, said, "My dear advisors, I have reached a decision that will lift the spirits of the realm and bring joy to all. I hereby announce a grand tournament to be held in the honor of Prince Joffrey's name day. Such an expense would definitely push the Iron Throne in further debt." Not agreeing to this, Jon intervened. "Your Grace, with all due respect, the realm's coffers are already strained. Holding a grand tournament at this time would only worsen our financial situation. King Robert, being as dismissive as he usually was when it came to matters of finance, waved his hands away. "John, my old friend, you worry too much. We'll find a way to fund this tournament, perhaps with some sponsorships from noble houses or by securing loans. The people need something to celebrate, and a tourney shall provide just that." Jon Arryn was quite resolute and stuck to his point. "Your Grace, I understand the importance of keeping the people's spirits high, but we cannot overlook the dire state of our finances. It is my duty as Hand of the King to ensure the stability of the realm." Robert disagreed and leaned forward and said, "Stability, Jon? Stability is one thing, but what good is it if the people have no joy in their lives? This tournament will bring them together, inspire hope, and distract them from their troubles. It's exactly what we need." Not seeing an alternative solution, decided to try and convince his elder brother. "Brother, I must agree with Jon. The finances of the realm are not stable, and we can ill afford to indulge in such costly endeavors. Our priority should be repaying our debts, not hosting lavish events." Robert was a demon in battle, bettering and destroying his enemies and a fantastic general. However, he was not exactly known for his patience. Feeling many of the small council opposing his proposal, he lost his temper and bellowed, "Enough! I've made my decision and it stands. This tournament will proceed, and the people will have something to look forward to. We'll find a way to fund it, even if it means cutting back on some unnecessary expenses." The room falls into an uneasy silence as the weight of the king's decision settles upon them. Jon Arryn, though concerned, resigns himself to the fact that his counsel has been overruled. Bowing his head, he accepts Robert's order. "As you command, Your Grace. I shall make the necessary arrangements for the tournament." Robert nodded as he stood and left the small council. Jon rubbed his temples, no doubt to stave off the incoming headache. As they all realigned their plans to fit in the tourney, Jon looked old, tired and weary. As the small council meeting came to an end, Stannis started to move away to be at Dragonstone. After Shireen's miracle recovery, he was not wasting more time. He wanted to be back to his family.